Here.
Councilmember Stevens.
Present.
Councilmember Spencer. Councilmember Wright.
Aye.
It's back. I'm just pausing, hoping that they can fix the feedback loop up here.
From a bunch of dogs.
Ah, that's better. It's all right. Any council members have any comments? Councilmember Siemens and then Councilmember Clay.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a list, so I will work through these quickly. First of all, I remind my colleagues on the council of the Independence Day Committee's desire for help in talking with the various civic associations about our need for additional volunteers for the celebration this year, both in the planning phase and also on the 4th of July to help with some of the things. I know, Councilmember Robinson, you had a civic association meeting recently. I wonder if there was any feedback from that?
There was interest, but no volunteers on the spot. I gave them contact information.
Thank you. And I know, Councilmember Wright, you have meetings coming up soon. I hope that you will remember to give us a call if we can join you at those meetings and try to find some more volunteers. And also with the Independence Day, I wondered, Barb, if you had any recommendations yet for a reviewing stand for the event?
No, not at this time, Councilmember Siemens.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to remind the community that on June 1st, that's a Sunday, between 12 and 4 is the Children's Day celebration at Piney Branch Elementary School. A lot of activities planned, but since I have such a long list tonight, I won't go through that at this time. I received a copy late last week of a traffic study that Montgomery County has done for the neighborhood that includes non-Tacoma Park streets over in, I think they call it Sligo Hills neighborhood, and also includes portions of Tacoma Park streets in the same traffic study. They have already, within that study, identified plans for making signage changes and some other changes that are going to affect the traffic within the streets of Tacoma Park. It concerns me a great deal to find out today that the city of Tacoma Park was not, the planners knew nothing of this. I know that in 2006, a couple of times I mentioned that I had heard a rumor that there was a traffic study going on, and yet the planners knew nothing about this. They evidently didn't see the study until I gave them a copy. It came from our Public Works Department. It bothers me as a Montgomery County taxpayer that our neighborhood, although it's identified as being within the traffic study area, was not invited to any of the meetings, did not participate in any of the meetings, and knew nothing about the traffic study officially. And I would ask, I think it's a very difficult situation now because there are already recommendations. The county is planning on moving forward with changes in their neighborhood with just kind of a footnote in the document that we recognize these changes are going to affect the streets in Tacoma Park, but that's their problem. I think that's an outrageous way of doing business. I think it's very disappointing that we don't have a better relationship with our county offices so that we work together on these types of programs. And I'm now faced with the difficulty of having to sit down with my neighbors to try to figure out where do we go from here and what kind of rights do we have as Montgomery County residents and what kind of support are we getting from our city. I want to take a minute and just thank everybody involved. I hope that the community has heard that the Piney Branch Elementary School swimming pool is going to be reopened. The county has put money in their budget this year to reopen the pool, and Adventist Community Services is joining as a partner as the organization that's going to operate the swimming pool. It's kind of breaking news. We'll leave it to Mike Mino with the Gazette to tell us all the details tomorrow in the newspaper. But I just want to thank everybody for all the effort and all the emails and all the work, including what this council did to try to make this happen. I would like to identify all the names and thank everybody, but let's just leave it. I'm over 60, so I probably forget somebody. And anyways, they just all deserve a round of applause. And then I also, Pat Lovelace, who is the blind gentleman that's here, was very consistent through the months. It's his birthday today. He's still recovering from his heart surgery and compressed vertebrae from a fall that he took. And anyways, I wish him a happy birthday. And then lastly, I know that as we've been going through this budget process, many of us have added things that we want to see on the reconciliation list. We have our own favorite little projects we have added that are additional ways to spend money. I would like to suggest a way that maybe a source of money that we can find and add that to the reconciliation list. We heard when the Recreation Department was in here that one of our managers of the Recreation Department is going to be has accepted a job outside of the city. And I would like to put on the reconciliation list that salary, so that we would freeze that salary at this time and decide during reconciliation whether that's a position we want to continue to fund. And that's all. Thank you.
Councilmember Clay, welcome back.
Oh, thank you. So I've been in Arkansas for 2 weeks on disaster deployment with the Corporation for National Service, so I missed you all. And I thought I was going to be able to watch you on streaming video, but I ended up staying at a cabin out in the woods during the 2 weeks, so I actually didn't get to see much, and I have a lot of catching up to do. So I just came back into town, so if I haven't answered your email yet, it's because I had 853 of them while I was gone, so I'm still working on that. I also wanted to say thanks to the folks about the pool project and to thank everyone involved. When I went to the Piney Branch PTA meeting the first night that the pool came up on the PTA agenda, and some of the kids were there from a club that they have that's what they call their Young Activist Club. And I talked to the parents and the kids at the meeting and invited them to come and speak to the city council and bring their petitions, and they came. And I told them, they should try to keep it to about a half an hour, and I think they presented for 2 hours that night. So then I had to apologize and bring baklava the next week to all of the people on the council. And I have two comments about that, and one of them is that I think there's a couple reasons why the pool activity was successful. It was very positive. I think we were fighting for something, and it was everybody. It wasn't any one person's issue. So all the folks on the council worked, I think, together really effectively on the issue, and worked across with all of the different people that we could get at the county council level to work with us, which was great. And the other thing that I thought made it really effective is that when we were first talking, I was talking to the kids and to the parents about lobbying directly to their county council people, because a lot of times people talk to me and they say, will you go talk to the county council person for me? And I said, well, yeah, I'll give them a call, and if it's an easy issue, that's okay. But when it's a bigger issue, it really makes a difference to the county council people and to your state legislature when they hear from their constituents directly. And I think that was a key element of what happened with the pool project. And then the last thing that I wanted to say is that a lot of people came forward and said that they were going to use the pool, and that just knowing about the pool would make a difference, and people would come out and use it, and it needs to be better marketed. And I think that we have a responsibility to follow through on that and show people that that is in fact the case, that if we market the pool and we participate in that and more people know about the pool, that they will come and use it. So all of you folks who said that you would come and use the pool now that you knew that it was there, you need to come out and use the swimming pool. Thank you.
Councilmember Wright?
Couple comments tonight. One is I thank the city manager for getting back to me with additional information about how much more it costs us to purchase wind power than carbon-based electricity. And I was interested to find that for the 11% kilowatt hours that we bought with wind power in 2007, it was just under $3,000 additional. So that makes me more certain that we should put forth an effort in this budget cycle to commit to furthering the amount of electricity we buy through wind power. The next thing I want to bring up is the survival guide, the Tacoma Park survival guide. I asked that that be put on the reconciliation budget list as something for us to debate about not funding. And I actually, through gaining some further information from the city staff and the Tacoma Park Cooperative Nursery School, would actually, unless other council members still want it on, I personally think we should take it off of the reconciliation list. When I learned more and found out it's actually almost more like a fee-for-service, where the city's paying to have not only themselves listed, but other businesses, Tacoma Park businesses, listed in the guide, and then the fact that how widely that gets distributed across the city. It gets distributed to every single individual house. If you're in an apartment building that has less than 4 units, each unit gets one, and if it's a larger apartment building, they drop off multiple copies, and then information about how you can get more copies if you want your own copy. So I'd ask that be taken off the reconciliation list if possible. I've gotten a number of emails from individuals living on Park Avenue as well as the rest of the Penn neighborhood, and every single email has asked that the council stick to its original promise and funding to correct the parking lot, for lack of a better word or phrase, that the city constructed behind a house that's actually on Carroll Avenue as part of the streetscape project on Carroll Avenue. And I am in full agreement, as I've said from the beginning, that we should continue to stick to that promise. I want to let everyone know that next Tuesday, the Tuesday after Memorial Day, there is a public comment time and opportunity for the council to discuss the possibility of changing the Route 25 bus. It now runs down Maple and kind of around the hospital and back up. And the main interest in doing this, or to me the only interest in doing this, is to give the senior citizens at Vickery Tower better access to the community center. I don't know that that is the perfect solution or the right solution, but I think we need to investigate it along with some other possibilities, potentially using the city bus. I wanted to ask the city manager if she has any update on where we are with asking the parties at the county who are responsible for dealing with the relocation of the children for the Tacoma Park Elementary School redesign. When they were here, I asked if we could have the people, because the people here are much more about the actual physical project, and whether we have any progress in getting the people who are responsible for the actual relocation process and that decision here to take questions and listen to residents.
I don't specifically recall, Councilmember Wright, any member of the council asking them to appear before you, but we can certainly do that. I did have a conversation with someone at the school district who sort of walked me through the process that they went through and some of the factors that they examined, and I can certainly boil that down in an email and send it to the council. If you would like someone to appear before you, I can certainly see if we can make those arrangements.
I think that would be my preference. I don't know if other council members, I know Councilmember Clay is also interested in the issue. I don't know if she cares also if we actually have someone from the county here, but that would be my preference.
If I can just say that I'll get together with you and see what's going to work best.
Okay. Let me just check my list here.
My list wasn't so long.
I second, my last item is just that I second Councilmember Siemens' request to have the open now, it was an open position in the Recreation Department, placed on the reconciliation budget for discussion. We may decide that we still would want to go forward with continuing to have that position, but I think we should at least discuss it, given that there's a lot of things that have been put on the reconciliation list, and we need to figure out a way to pay for them, because I, again, would advocate that we need to do all of those additions within the construct of the total budget number that the city manager proposed at the beginning of this whole process. Thank you.
Councilmember Snipper.
Just an addition to your Councilmember Wright's comment about the changes to Route 25. They also included a swing around the market, and that's been requested by a number of folks also. So to extend the route so that it goes around the little shopping center at Flower and Piney Branch through behind Giant. So that's another reason for making a change, and it would make sense to put all of our changes out there on and discuss them all at once, see if we could come to some agreement on which route would be best.
Just on the bus issue, I want to add a comment on the change to ride on bus route 25. Just want to let the council members know that there is a petition circulating in Ward 4 in support of changing the route and both avoiding the speed humps on Maple Avenue, passing through the Old Town District, and also on into the business district over on Arliss Avenue, or Street. Thank you.
Okay. I'd just like to provide one agenda scheduling update. Let people know that Councilmember Siemens and I attended a wonderful gala on Saturday night, the Work of Heart Regional Foster Parent Appreciation Gala. And this is sponsored by the Council of Governments, by Freddie Mac, and News Channel 4. And it's a time when foster parents throughout the Washington region come together and have an evening out, and a number of them are recognized for the great effort that they put into helping kids who are in need in our region. And I sat at the table with some of the people who were in charge of this effort in Montgomery County and asked how many foster parent households there are in Montgomery County currently, and they said 260, and I said, how many more do you need? And they said 200. So I've asked them if they could come to a future city council meeting and make a presentation on their foster parent program, and then maybe we can get the word out and try and see if some residents in Tacoma Park might be willing to participate in this. It can be as short term as a night or two to have kids. It can also be longer term, but it's definitely something that I hope some people consider doing, and we will have a presentation on that sometime in the near future. It's now time for public comments. Anybody who wishes to make comments, please come to the microphone, and please identify yourself and keep your comments to 3 minutes.
How long do you have? Good evening.
3 minutes.
3 minutes. Thank you. Good evening and greetings to everyone here. It's different from the last set of people I've seen, and welcome to the newcomers. My name is Crystal Pittman, and I'm from the Houston Apartments in Tacoma Park, Maryland. And the reason I'm here is to speak in support of maintaining our city tenant organizers. And the reason I ask for that support because I'm a recipient of the wonderful work that I feel that they do in terms of educating tenants about housing and also about their rights. And at our building, some of you may be familiar that our building at Houston Avenue was going to be converted to a condo by rest his soul, Mr. David Beachy. And I say rest his soul because some people may not know that Mr. David Beachy sadly passed away with his entire family in a plane crash. And anyway, our building was being converted to a condo, and many of us was threatened with losing our homes because not everyone is in a position to afford a condo or to purchase a home, whether you're low income, moderate, whatever. And our situation, for me, after 15 years, I didn't have the ability to go into a condo, and the city tenant organizers educated our tenants about how to go about trying to not have our building converted, to see what we could do. And following their lead led us to so many other leads, including city council people, and got us involved even in the community more, and voting, and all in all, our building has been saved. We're not being converted. An affordable housing program, Montgomery Housing Project, took over our building. It's being renovated. I personally just moved this weekend within my building while my unit is being renovated. Then I get to go back. Even though we're going to pay light and gas now, I'm still very pleased. And I know there's a lot of low-income and moderate-income people that want to stay in Tacoma Park because it's a diverse community. So I think city tenant organizers help keep Tacoma Park a diverse community that everybody can live here, and I would like you to keep them around, not eradicate them. And thank you so much, and thanks for everybody also up there that probably helped Houston Avenue. All right? God bless affordable housing.
Thank you, and thank you for letting us know about Mr. Vici and his family.
Hi, my name is Kathleen Prentice. I'm a resident of Tacoma Park. I live on Cheney Drive. I've lived here since 1996. Mayor Williams and the council, I'd like to thank you for your time. I'd also like to thank Councilmember Wright for supportive comments. And the reason I'm here is to talk about the Tacoma Park Business Directory and Survival Guide. We heard that there were some questions at the last budget meeting about why the city was contributing to the Tacoma Park Business Directory and Survival Guide, which I'm just going to call the guide for short. So I wanted to come and clarify on behalf of the nursery school the role of the nursery school and how the city benefits from participating with the guide. To build on what Councilmember Wright said, the guide is produced by the Tacoma Park Cooperative Nursery School. We originally devised it as a service to the residents of Tacoma Park. The nursery school has been in Tacoma Park since 1944, and we first conceived of the guide in 1998. We produced it, published, and distributed it to every household in Tacoma Park. And a couple years later, maybe around 2001, the city took notice of it, and they came to us and said, hey, we'd like to leverage the guide and use it to disseminate even more information about the city. And so what we agreed was that the city would provide us additional information to the front section of the guide about city services, and we would also, the nursery school would print a listing, business listing for every Tacoma Park business, and the city would pay us for any additional printing costs that we incurred to include that information, because the first guide included some information about the city and business listings, but it wasn't quite to the level that it is now. And so you've all received a copy of your guide probably today. We delivered them throughout the city this past weekend. This year, the Tacoma Park Business Directory and Survival Guide contains over 675 Tacoma Park business listings that those businesses receive for free. There are 72 pages of information about the city in both English and Spanish. And local businesses have communicated to us that they see tangible benefits of being listed in this guide, and also they have the opportunity to advertise in it, and they also see benefits to that. Collectively, our schools puts in each year over 3,300 hours of volunteer time into producing this guide. I myself have been in charge of the production of it. I've put in hundreds upon hundreds of hours the past 2 years into making this thing happen. So the families put in all those hours to produce the guide, and we hand deliver over 6,000 copies throughout the city. And the proceeds by the guide are the only source of income to our nursery school other than our tuition, and it allows us to employ local staff. We're able to offer them health care benefits and maintain tuition levels that enable the school to be accessible to families from the broadest possible demographic range. So In sum, what the city gets from the survival guide is essentially a fee for service. We are including all the information, publishing all the thorough, detailed city information in the front, and providing the free listings. And for the amount, on a purely economic basis, the amount that the city contributes, which over the past few years has averaged about $7,600 a year, when you consider all of the volunteer time that gets put into actually making it happen, the city is getting a lot of value for their investment. So to finish up, the nursery school sees as part of its mission, because we're cooperative, to support the surrounding community and be as involved as we can, and the guide is one way that we're able to do that. So we appreciate our long-standing collaboration with the city, and we look forward to continuing it, and we do hope that it will continue. And I thank you for your time.
Thanks.
Hello, Council. My name is Timothy Cooper. I'm here representing Steve Francis Foundation. Just to give you a little history about us. 10 years ago, we started, just having cookouts up at the park, and just recently, about maybe 4 years ago, we decided we want to invite the whole community. So that's what we
Is it
started
for
doing.
Independence Day?
Yes, I'm sorry, on Independence Day, the 4th of July. Last year, I think we served about 700 people altogether. We have 125-foot moon bounce. We have 2 other side moon bounces. We have free food, free drinks, entertainment. Last year was a big success. Last year was our first time working with the police department, recreation department, and the city manager. They showed us the rules that we had to do. We followed all the rules. We just wanted to see if the council members could back us in letting the whole community know. We want to invite everybody as possible. We want to make it every year. Steve just basically wants to give back to the community. We give back on Thanksgiving and Christmas. We're trying to find another day where we can show our gratitude of growing up here. I've been growing up here for 30 years now, and I don't want to leave. So I'm pretty sure he doesn't want to either. But he has to leave to his job in Houston. But he comes back whenever he can just to try to give out to the kids and to the community. So we basically want to ask for the council, can you please just help us out a little bit and spread the word for us.
Be happy to. Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to thank you and the Steve Francis Foundation, not just for the special things that you do for this community with the meals that you hand out at Christmas and Thanksgiving, and also the gifts that you hand out to the children, but also for the Independence Day party that you put on. I understand that Steve has said he wants this to be a community-wide event, and I hope that the city will work to make it expedite the permit request so that you can start advertising that. I also want to thank you for addressing the problems that had been brought to your attention over the past years. I know there were some drinking problems and other problems that I think were resolved very well last year with the signage and the announcements that you made and making sure that no one was drinking there. I know the location of the moon bounce, and I don't know if anybody noticed, he said 125 feet, I think, of moon bounce. It's an incredible thing, and it's not just one, but you have a couple of moon bounces there. Yes, I know that the location of that has been a problem because of the irrigation system on Ed Wilhelm Field. I know that the past management within the Recreation Department was able to identify where that was located so that there were no problems caused with that. And I would like to see that, I'm sure that the Steve Francis Foundation would be willing to take out a bond in case there was any damage to the field, that it could be repaired. And then lastly, I think one of the problems that I saw last year is that your event was over too soon before the fireworks started, and it left a big crowd of people with no place to go and nothing to do for a couple of hours. And so I would request from the city manager if we could think about having that barbecue picnic remain open until just a half hour before the fireworks event starts, and people start accumulating there, so that there's a smooth transition and not end up with a whole bunch of people who want to go to the fireworks but nothing to do between the barbecue and the fireworks display.
Yes, definitely. Like last year, they made us stop the music, I think at 5 o'clock, and they wanted us to shut down at 6. And then, I mean, everybody in the community, grown-ups, senior citizens, everybody like, where's everybody going, you know? And we was like, we got to leave. I mean, we have a lot of food left over and everything. So, I mean, we don't want to go till, you know, dark. But like years in the past, when people would leave the cookout, go straight to the fireworks. I mean, it's like a whole day event that we want the kids to have a good time. That's all.
Sounds like a good plan. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Miriam Shapiro. I live at 118 Park Avenue, and I'm here to speak to the council about the 7118 Carroll Avenue project. I would like first to thank the council for the unanimous commitment it made to the Park Avenue neighborhood in 2005 and 2006 to fix the terrible eyesore that the city created on Park Avenue as a result of its Carroll Avenue beautification project. As some may recall, the Park Avenue neighborhood had never been informed about or given an opportunity to object to or participate in the city's decision to move the 4-car parking lot from the front of 7118 Carroll to the back. This turned the one-screen backyard of this outstanding resource, once the home of Warren Harding's sister, into a concrete parking lot. The city provided residents a deceptive sketch that showed a one-lane driveway screened by extensive plantings of trees, bushes, and a picket fence, a veritable parkland. Though city staff never spoke to neighbors about its plan, the city nonetheless obtained HPC's reluctant approval of its design on the baseless claim that it had neighborhood support. In late 2005 and 2006, the council responded to the pleas of an outpouring of neighbors and unanimously gave them its word that it would approve funding to fix the problem. The council was clearly concerned by the city's failure to provide due process to the Park Avenue neighbors and also by the obvious eyesore that the city had imposed upon the neighborhood. Since that time, the neighbors, working with the city, have neared completion on a design. While it does not restore the original green backyard, it reflects a compromise that at least removes the eyesore and helps to restore the integrity of the property. We were gratified by the city's decision to fund this work. It went a long way toward restoring our faith in the process. We are here today to implore you to keep the commitment you made to our neighborhood and provide the funds necessary to implement the final design. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Seth Grimes, 7300 Willow Avenue. I'm also here as president of the Old Town Residents Association, which includes the neighborhood where Park Avenue, which Miriam Shapiro just spoke about, is located. I'm here to speak personally on behalf of OTRA in favor of the city's not only reaffirming its commitment to correct the errors that were made a few years back in paving over that backyard, but to also expedite having that work done. It's been over 2 years. The work needs to be done. There were 3 issues that I see here. One is that the process was flawed in terms of the notification of the people affected most immediately by the project, because the house where the area that was paved is located is facing one street, even though the lot faces another. There are errors of process where there was insufficient notification. Secondly, the project was poorly executed. The city placed in, as Ms. Shapiro said, a concrete slab. That is not ecologically sound. Impervious surface like that is not good green practices rather. So I would hope that the city going forward would not, forgetting about the process here, would not carry out a similar project like this in this manner. So there is a process problem, there is an execution problem, and then further there's the question of the commitment that has not been fulfilled to the people in the neighborhood. It is important to do that. I'd like to draw your attention to one other thing by recalling what Councilmember Siemens was saying about county work on traffic studies that affected Tacoma Park. with essentially neglected Tacoma Park. Well, that's exactly analogous to the situation we have here, where the city itself notified neighbors on one street and not on another and gave them deceptive information, basically thumbed their noses at people on a street that were immediately adjacent to the project and neglected their opinions. I hope that we won't see this kind of neglect. I know it's an issue that has come up in the very recent past with some of the traffic calming, traffic routing measures that are occurring in some of your wards, but not in this one, where people look at these as things that affect all of Tacoma Park and not just people who live in the immediate neighborhoods or the immediate streets and so on. And I'd like you to consider that. And I'd like you to consider it in particular when the council discusses the rerouting of Ride-On Route 25 next week. My understanding is that there will not be notification of people in every household along the routes that are the areas there where the routing change would affect. It is very important to get people involved in these processes at the earliest possible moment. They may choose not to show up at a meeting and so on, but they won't be able to say they haven't been notified, and you won't be hearing from them later about how you did a poor job, you meaning the city collectively, of notifying them. Thank you.
Thanks.
Kay Daniels, Cohen, 19 Sherman Avenue, and tonight I am going to wear two hats. One hat, first hat, is swimming pool maven and sister of Buddy Daniels of 19 Sherman Avenue. We would both like, and my husband, would like to thank Mayor Williams and especially Councilmember Siemens for your conscientious effort in saving the Piney Branch swimming pool. It isn't very often you can draw together the kind of team that you were able to get together, who were able to allow their egos to stay at the door and actually make something happen. It was quite refreshing and very exciting, and all that comes from your excellent leadership. And both Buddy Jack Cohen and Kay Daniels Cohen, thank you from the bottoms of our heart. Second hat. I'm coming to you also as the chairperson of the Recreation Committee, and I want to urge you to approve the Winter Basketball League resolution, which I believe is on your reconciliation list, so that we can actually begin the league this winter. It's a win-win for our community. The Recreation Committee is committed to 200 participants, 20 teams from kindergarten to 5th grade, with both boys and girls participating in a developmental league. It doesn't get better than this, because we're also going to get the coaches, get the volunteers, and run the program, market it, and what's most important, be in partnership with the Recreation Department. So they receive all the kudos for a really swell program. It doesn't really get better than that. What's not to love? And in conclusion, I thank you again. I always thank you every time I come for the ability to be a participant as a citizen on this level. It's what sets Tacoma Park above most of the cities of its kind in the whole area. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. Hello. I'm Cindy Dibella, and I'm from Elm Avenue, 500 block. I'm on the Town Recreation Committee, and I'm here to give a little more specifics about this one item in your budget reconciliation list. You asked us to look at partnerships and building community, looking at using the center more, existing gym space, and as a committee, we looked at, rather than tackle the big picture first, queue up a few early successes while we all take this next year to look at the recreation program in its entirety. So we think this is one of those early successes. Kay talked about the idea, co-ed basketball, similar to the indoor soccer program, if those of you remember that one. Clinics in December, games in the winter, games after New Year's. The difference here being really trying to build partnerships with one or more groups that already have some programs near here, plus building on the volunteer network that already exists in Tacoma in the fall and the spring for volunteer coaches and teams in the soccer and baseball leagues. try to pull that together to expand the offerings to this age group. The costs are pretty minimal. It's the keeping the gym open and paying the referees. The benefits are, we think, pretty big. If it flies, it draws kids into the other programs, draws them into the gyms and then into the center. It brings a bunch of different kinds of kids of diverse backgrounds together, fostering that kind of community spirit we thought we would have when we got into all this. So we're asking you to endorse it as a committee, and to provide the funding, and it would be, again, up to you whether you want to target it as an additional cost, an additional reconciliation item, or whether you want to put it into the recreation, within the existing recreation budget, because the cost is not that great to start with. So, didn't mean to go on quite that long, but that's what we have for you today. So thank you for listening to me.
Thank you.
Good evening. With that said and done, hopefully everyone is well. My name is Fred Hernandez. I live in 7600 Maple Avenue. I am also the president of the Real Park Ritchie Tenant Association. I am one that a beneficiary from many programs that Tacoma Park has to offer. Me and my family, having children from 2 years old to 16. I come to all these programs with an open heart and willing to help. But there's one program that I didn't attend, didn't know about, but came to me. And it's the city organizers. Everybody who works from Linda Walker down to Mary Castillo and Rosanna Look helped us in a tremendous way. Councilman Siemens has gotten to know me and my family. I've been here for 13 years. And like the other gentleman said, I don't intend to leave anytime soon. I got a 2-year-old son that I want to graduate high school, hopefully go to Maryland University. But this program was very important to us when we were going through an ordeal with Southern Management Corporation. The council, the mayor, and everybody who works in Tacoma Park had a big deal with us staying, a lot of families staying. They were basically kicking us out. Like I said, there's a lot of organizations, there's a lot of programs that need funding, but this was just one dear and near to my heart that I hope gets the funding and the support that it needs. Like I said, realistically, we would like every program to be funded, but that's not the way it is. Fiscal responsibility is everybody's responsibility, and I understand that. But that's one that's near and dear to me. Thank you. Good evening.
Thanks very much.
Good evening, council members, city clerk, city manager, and honorable mayor. My name is Tanya Elbinian. I'm here on behalf of the Hampshire Tower Tenants Association and to speak to you today regarding the City Organizers program. City Organizers has been essential in helping Hampshire Towers Tenant Association maintain their building, go through the negotiation process with its developers, secure its entire deal, stay with the Tenants Association from the inception through the duration. We feel that this program is very essential, particularly because Hampshire Towers is a property unique to itself, 451 units. It is one of the largest apartment complexes in Tacoma Park with affordable housing. If it were not for the city organizers, about 200 and some odd homes, families would have been displaced at least, and that's a minimal number. we're asking that you consider not terminating or eliminating this project or this plan, because it is essential to the community. And Tacoma Park is definitely a wonderful community to live in. It is definitely a wonderful community to raise your children in, to be proud to be a member of. And this program helps homeowners to do that. Thank you for your time, and have a beautiful evening.
Thank you.
Good evening, Your Honor, council members. My name is Dan Mudd. I'm a resident of Park Avenue. I never could have imagined in December 2005 that I would be back speaking to the council about the Park Avenue parking lot. Seems amazing to me that 2.5 years has passed, and unfortunately we have not resolved this situation. I just want to echo the thoughts of other people who have spoken that there was no, and also Councilman Siemens' concerns about fair notification and involvement of neighbors, and to quote you, an outrageous way of doing business. I really want to see the council and the city follow through on its unanimous commitment to the residents of Park Avenue. Those of us on Park Avenue have worked very hard for the last 2.5 years with the city staff to try and make a plan that will salvage what was done. That the residents of that house used to actually let their children play and picnic in a beautiful green backyard. And I've often said it's great that the yard facing Carroll Avenue is a greener, nicer space, but I don't think anyone would advocate that they let their children play on Carroll Avenue. It might be great if they would allow them to do that on Park Avenue, but now it's a large parking lot which covers 75% of the yard with impervious concrete. So I just want to urge you to follow through on the commitment which was made to the residents of Park Avenue to fix what was done. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you.
My name's Jackie Breitman. I'm at 120 Park. I'm right across the street from the property that Dan and Miriam and others have talked about. I was not here in 2005. I moved in a year ago. I was in Tacoma Park in 2005, and I wanted to stay in Tacoma Park. Part of the due diligence I did before ratifying the contract on the house that I purchased at 120 Park was to investigate what was going on across the street, because it is an eyesore. And I had the good fortune of knowing my neighbors in advance and had long conversations with my next door neighbor about what the plans were. Now, I can't honestly say I would not have ratified the contract if the fixes hadn't been planned, but it definitely was part of my consideration. So I do urge you to reaffirm your commitment. I recognize that money is always tight, and it always looks like there are better things, around the corner. I know that many of you were not part of the decision to initially make that commitment. I also know that my neighbors have worked diligently, and it is not because of reticence or lack of cooperation from the neighbors that the project has not been completed yet. So I do urge you to reaffirm your commitment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Williams and City Council. My name is Scott Hardy, and I am a Park Avenue resident, 117. I live next door to the concrete parking lot, which has been installed. I was here in 2005, and I did see the proposed plans, which are not exactly what I look out every day, and for the past 2 years. I would like to reaffirm everything that has been said earlier and let you know that I support the decision to go ahead and try to push this as quickly as possible. We have worked hard and long with the city to go ahead and come up with a plan that does rectify some of the mistakes that were made in the past. And I would like to invite any of you to, if you don't think that this should be moved forward, just to drive by, and it will speak for itself. It does not resemble any of the green space that we cherish here in Tacoma Park. Thank you.
Thanks.
My name's Sabrina Barron. I'm the president of Historic Tacoma, and I'm here to support what Miriam Shapiro, Seth Grimes, and Scott, Dan, Jackie, the neighbors on Park have been saying this evening, and to encourage you to honor your commitment to rectify the mistakes that were made in that situation. Historic Tacoma got involved in this a couple of years ago and arranged some meetings that led to the negotiations to rectify the situation. It is an eyesore. It has destroyed green space. It's added an incredible amount of impermeable surface. And I urge you to rectify this situation and take the desires and the concerns of the residents on Park Avenue as well as people on Carroll Avenue into consideration. And I'll just take the opportunity to tack on to the end of this that I hope we're not heading for a similar situation at Tacoma Junction. I hope you're listening to what the residents of the city want in their neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thanks.
Good evening, members of the council. I am Kathy Porter, resident of Elm Avenue, and I am here this evening with the new hat that I wear, the board member of the Tacoma Foundation. The Tacoma Foundation recently put $8,000 into 2 public art projects here at the community center, and it has earmarked another $20,000 for 1 or more, maybe 2 or 3 mosaic projects to decorate the inside or the outside of the community center. What we would like to do is we'd like to partner with the members of the council in doing this. What that partnership would involve would be working through the Arts and Humanities Commission to advertise for artists for these mosaics and have the Arts and Humanities Commission make the final decision. If there are concerns that you have about locations, that kind of thing, this would be a good time to talk about it. But at the end, we would also like to see a commitment from the city to put another $20,000, matching the Tacoma Foundation's $20,000 into this project. I know you have a very difficult budget session. You have very difficult reconciliation this year. And so we're not asking for a commitment for the $20,000 up front. But what I am asking for is a good faith commitment that if the process goes through and you're happy with the outcome, that you will at that point provide the $20,000 match for the Tacoma Foundation's $20,000. We can talk about, how the process goes. If you have any concerns, we can talk about that. But I think that this would be a good way of sort of stretching both the money that the foundation would like to commit and the money that you would put into it. If you have concerns about locations, process, whatever, we in the Arts and Humanities Commission would be happy to talk to you about that. I want to add, by the way, you all should have gotten an email from Howard Cohn about this with some information on that. I know he's been very interested in this project also. Howard wanted to be here this evening, but his son is getting a special award as the outstanding math and science student at Blair High School. So he went and did that instead. I also wanted to just note that the Tacoma Foundation has also supported the Community Indicators Project. That's part of the strategic planning process that the city is thinking about doing, and the foundation is very supportive of that. It hasn't come through us for funding yet, but I think the foundation would be interested in doing that kind of thing. There's also support among the members of the board in putting in some time, including myself putting in some time to see this move forward. I think it's really an essential piece of the base of information that you need in order to decide what the community needs and what kinds of community needs need to be addressed. So I want to support that myself, and the board has also, Tacoma Foundation Board has also gone record in supporting the Community Indicators project. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Alice Sims. I'm 7109 Carroll Avenue. I'm here as a member of the Recreation Committee, and I want to urge you to support the Mosaic Mural Project. I know many people in Tacoma Park. It seems like it's 2 years now people are talking about mosaics. I know people who want to do mosaics and people who want to teach and people who want to learn more about mosaics. And I think this would be a wonderful project for the community. Mosaics are colorful and they're long-lasting, both indoors and outdoors. So I would like to ask you to support it. I believe it's on the budget, and I think it's a wonderful idea. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more citizen comment? All right, then we will move on to city manager's comments.
I'll be very brief since I know the council's very behind on its time frame. Just wanted to draw the council's attention. There is some additional information at your places this evening. It's the one with the orange cover. Included in that packet is information on at least two of the issues that were addressed tonight, including the Park Avenue parking lot. I included in your supplemental information packet a letter from one of the speakers this evening, kind of summarizing the neighbors' comments about where we are in that process, as well as a copy of the concept drawings for those of you who may not be familiar with what is proposed at that location. Also included in that informational packet is some of the statistical and background information that had been requested about the capacity building initiative, which a number of individuals spoke about this evening. Just very briefly, one last item. I think last week Councilmember Robinson had asked if I would just briefly update the council on the meeting that the staff had with SHA about the proposed roundabout in Tacoma Junction. Just in a nutshell, SHA basically reviewed the roundabout, since that is specifically what the city asked them to do. They are very happy to look at other alternatives and have indicated their willingness to do so. Those alternatives would probably be what they described as more of a small-scale approach that did not involve extensive right-of-way acquisition or utility relocation due to the cost associated with that process. They are probably looking at getting back with the city sometime in mid to late October. They wanted to make sure, as they were evaluating that location and drawing any conclusions about other possible alternatives, that they had the benefit of seeing when school was fully in session and getting a complete picture of what went on at that location. So that's sort of a very brief recap of what happens. I don't think there'll be probably any additional information until probably in the fall.
Thank you.
That's it?
That's it.
Okay. Thank you. Next on the agenda are some interviews. First, we'll be talking with potential members of the Washington Adventist Hospital Land Use Committee, and I believe we have 4 of the 5 people who are listed. If Keith Berner, Kathleen Quinn, Therese Greenbow Robinson, and Pamela Spar would like to come up to this table here. And then the other woman who was on the list is going to be rescheduled for another week. She couldn't make it this evening. Welcome, all of you. And if each of you would like to take a minute or two and just tell us about your interest in serving on this committee, and we'll start with you.
My name is Therese Robinson, Greenhow Robinson, and I am a resident of Tacoma Park up in Hodges Lane. I've been a resident pretty much off and on within the past more than 30 years. I am a practitioner in the healing arts as a massage therapist, as well as a labor doula. I do peer counseling. I'm a breastfeeding peer counseling with the Leche League and a program administrator. And I am a member of Birth Option Alliance. And I guess I was appointed to be the liaison and be part of the committee of land use of the Washington Adventist Hospital for the use of having a birth center facility for peer counseling, breastfeeding peer counseling. That's pretty much where we're focusing on, just with the hopes of having the hospital, when they do leave within the next 5 to 10 years, to have a place and bringing back the midwives in Tacoma Park and the use of that. Because there is still a labor and delivery facility in the hospital, and they would hope to see that being used again by the CNMs that are here.
Good, thank you.
Do you want to ask them any questions?
Well, we'll just hear from all of you first.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Pam Spar, and I live in Hillwood Manor. And I'm an economist and have my own consulting business. I'm interested in being considered to be on the committee. One is because I've lived in the city about 16 years, and I figure it's about time for me to give back a little bit in terms of public service. I think I also have some specific skills and sensibilities that might be helpful to the committee, both in terms of my expertise in the areas of ecologically sustainable and just economic development, and also in terms of a lot of experience with participatory methodologies in terms of running community dialogues and strategic planning exercises with people with very diverse and sometimes radically opposed ideas. And so, not that this would necessarily be that kind of process, but I am familiar with how to deal with something like that and comfortable, so I could also contribute that to the committee if that would be helpful.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Quinn, and I'm on Hilton Avenue in Ward 2. I've been in Tacoma Park about 15 years. I currently do contingency planning for federal government, different agencies, disaster recovery. So pretty much work as a liaison with, that type of work. I'd like to get involved to review like the land usage that they do have proposed for the hospital. I don't have any agenda as to what I want it to be. I just want to be a part of, the planning issues that are going to go on and be part of the solution and not the problem.
All right.
My name is Keith Berner, 7902 Flower Avenue, and I'm the neophyte of this group, having lived in Tacoma Park only 8 years. I hope you'll forgive me for that. I think that my potential role on this committee is as a representative of the community adjacent to the hospital and college campus. I've been active in the issue regarding the hospital's expansion plans, and since as a member of Sensible Growth, the grassroots community organization that was very involved in that issue for several years. I have also been involved in the city as a member of the TASTU Task Force, and I am president of the Between the Creeks Neighborhood Association. It is unfortunately a moribund association, but I am in a position to understand some of the pulse of the community. I also do not have a particular agenda in wanting to join this committee. I think that the surrounding community is very interested in seeing a continued healthcare presence on the campus. And other than that, we are open to seeing any development that does not overwhelm the surrounding infrastructure, that does not damage the environment, and that is not unattractive. And I think that I can help keep the surrounding community informed, and can also be a liaison from that community to this committee.
Okay. Do the council members have any questions? Councilmember Snipper.
Yes, first I want to thank you all for volunteering on this committee. This is a really important committee. The hospital is a major institution in this community. It's been around 100 years, and their move has caused a tremendous amount of anxiety among folks. And so if in fact that move goes forward, and the hospital is fully planning that it will, we need to plan for how to use that site. The hospital clearly has some designs in mind, and they'll be announcing those more concretely probably later this summer, August, September, that kind of thing. But it's a perfect time for this committee to get started, talk to the people in the community, talk to the hospital, see what can be worked out to make that site work. We're in a wonderful position in one sense, which is it will take the hospital at least 5 years to move. And that gives us an opportunity to really work out what we want on that site and what would work on that site. And so we're kind of in a unique situation, and I'm not suggesting you'll have to serve for 5 years, but I do appreciate your willingness to serve at least for a couple of years. And I know you represent, it's been nice reading the resumes and all, you represent a lot of diverse experience, and I think that will really be helpful on this committee. Thanks.
And if I can just remind folks, I think this is the one that in terms of the length of the committee that we've set it up, that it would be 2 years, and then we would have to actively keep it going. So I would at least say that we envision, at this point anyway, 2 years. Councilmember Clay.
I want to thank you all for applying. I'm so happy to see the committee finally start to get off the ground after waiting for a year after the Health Services Impact Committee was put together, so I'm glad you'll be joining them. I think that was one of the things that we talked about, that the committee would work together with the Health Services Impact Committee, but that this is a separate committee that's really about, the things that Keith was talking about and that Councilmember Schnipper was talking about. Very critically important, and I think that one of the reasons why I'm so excited about this committee, it is this key opportunity for us to get ahead of the game and express to people what the parameters are. So it's not that, I want to have an ice cream stand like at this corner of this spot right here, but it's really about here's the range of the types of businesses that the community would like to see. These are the opportunities, these are the constraints, and put those forward and work actively to engage folks. So that's a tough charge and a lot of work to do, and I'm really happy that you have all stepped up.
Other questions or comments?
I actually wanted to make another comment, if I can. I think it's not like I'm trying to campaign here for the job, but I think another thing that I will bring to this committee is, because I've been involved in the issues with the hospital as long as I have, I bring some perspective on who they are as a negotiating partner. And in fact, we've had difficulty with them as a negotiating partner, and I think it will be important for this committee to have a very realistic view of how it is to work with them. And I hope to be able to add to that.
Okay. We have additional interviews set up at least into the early part of June, so we probably won't be doing anything in terms of naming people to the committee until at least mid-June. So you'll be hearing something, I guess, in about a month. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Nice to meet all of you.
Yeah, it was great.
And the next item is one interview for the Ethics Commission. Aaron Lavallee. I hope I pronounced your name correctly.
Lavallee.
Lavallee, okay. And if you'd like to tell us about your interest in serving.
All right. I'm actually very new to the area. Moved down in February with my better half and came down from a small New England town. I was working for a member of Congress and took a job down here with a small public relations firm based out of College Park, Maryland. And I and the business focus on public relations for public interest groups and a lot of renewable energy companies, a lot of wind energy companies. And after settling in, and I'm going to be starting grad school as well, and that's all taken care of, decided it was time to get involved in the community, primarily because we actually sought out Takoma Park and delayed moving down here till we were able to find a place here, partly on recommendation, but also on just the research that we did and realized that this was an extremely engaged town, similar to where we were coming from before. And after moving in and being here for several months, realized that the town is the way it is because the citizens are quite involved and engaged in the town and in their community.
Good. And you picked the Ethics Commission because?
Well, prior to moving here, I worked for a member of Congress, and after 13 months there, I realized that probably one of the most important functions that we can have to keep our community and government at all levels intact is some ethical oversight and accountability of it. And that's no statement to the gentleman I work for, but it's important at all levels of government.
Good. Any questions or comments? Well, we will be happy to name you to the Ethics Commission.
Well, thank you.
Thanks very much.
Have a good evening.
And belated welcome.
Yes, we love it. Thank you.
I think we can move it. We're running behind, but I think if we move on to the library discussion. I saw the librarian here. If she's close by, we'll do the library, and then we'll take a break after that. Okay, good.
We waited till you left.
And I assume you have some comments you want to make?
Yes, I'll make a few comments about the library budget. Try to keep it brief. Overall, the budget for the library and the community center, the computer center combined, for the proposed budget goes up by 4.9%, and most of that is personnel related. However, the staffing levels remain unchanged as they have in previous years. What is referred to as supplies accounts for about 14% of the operational increases, but this includes the costs of books, periodicals, reference materials, and office and computer supplies. Beyond that, I would really like to focus for a little bit on the accomplishments for fiscal year '08 and some of our management objectives that are proposed for this coming year. The accomplishments were sent out to you, I think, just with the agenda packet today, and I'll just mention a few of those quickly. Particularly, we're particularly proud about our overall increases in program attendance, as well as material circulation, in-library use, and registered borrowers. Our program attendance increased by just about 77% this past year. Circulation by 11.4%, in-library use by 15.2%, and our registered active borrowers, that is those cardholders that have used their card in the past year, increased by 12%. We initiated a number of new program activities. Bedtime Story Hour was revived as a series we haven't had it for several years. The LAPSIT programs as an incentive for caregivers, providing reading readiness, has been offered for infants up to 12 months. That's a new series as well. Our Summer Quest reading program last summer experienced record enrollment, almost 200, and the program itself was adopted by 2 local schools. And in fact, this coming year this summer it's being adopted by a 3rd, East Silver Spring, as well as Piney Branch and Tacoma Elementary Schools. one of our programs, which is actually tomorrow evening, is a graphic novel primer presented by Karen McPherson and Dave Burbank, which we believe to be one of the first, perhaps the first program in the area focusing on this new genre of literature, which has become incredibly popular in the library, bringing in a lot of new cardholders and a lot of new readers. And we have librarians and educators coming from schools and other libraries in the area just to attend it. We're very excited about it. Spanish programs for preschoolers is now increased to once a week, and that is possible with funding from the Friends of the Library. In partnership with Montgomery Works, we've initiated workshops for adults this year, focusing on the acquisition of job skills, resume writing, and this summer we're doing another series on interviewing. We have wireless printing now available for library patrons, and again, we think that we may be perhaps the first library in the area, the first public library to be able to do this, but people really like it. We're offering just very recently, within the past few weeks, online registration for programs. So people don't have to call or drop by and register. They can do it online, which is really nice. You already know the Mike Morrissey Golf Tournament netted $6,500 for the Friends of the Library. Our November book sale through the Friends netted $1,500, and we had a book sale yesterday that earned more than $2,000, so which is probably a record. So it was really successful. The Friends of the Library are now supporting 4 book clubs. That means they're buying the books for the people who attend the meetings, for the Friends Reading Group for adults, one for middle schoolers, and one for seniors, actually seniors enrolled in a book group started through the Recreation Department, but the Friends wanted to support books for that group as well. And there's also an online book club, which they're funding. 2 of our staff members earned master's degrees in library science this year, and we're very proud of both of them, Karen and Lucia. In the computer center, we've just very recently introduced a guest system, which is a way of allowing people who don't have cards, maybe from out of the area, even out of the country, to use the computers, and that will generate a $3 profit per use. I don't know that this is going to be a substantial revenue producer, but it makes things a lot simpler for us. It's appreciated by the people who use it, and it will generate some revenue, which is nice. We have workstations in the lobby area, and we're about to have 2 more for people who use wireless there. We've experimented with introductory computer classes in Spanish on Sunday afternoons, and we're going to try to continue with that, although the attendance was a little erratic, but Moises, who staffs the rooms on the weekends, wants to try it some more, so we may do it on a walk-in or a one-on-one basis by appointment. So I don't want to touch on everything, but those are some of the highlights which I wanted to be sure you were aware of. Getting to some of our management objectives for the coming year for the library. Again, we want to continue serving non-native speakers of English through the acquisition of more bilingual materials, more bilingual and Spanish language programs, and for the preschoolers. Plus, we would like to add, which we've only done a little of, Spanish language programming and bilingual programming for elementary age children. We know someone who can do this, and we're hoping we can engage her services. We want to strengthen the development of reading skills and reading readiness among school-age children. by expanding the programs directed toward this group, targeted materials such as readers, large format, big books, which we use in some of the story hours for really young kids, audiobooks, and again, graphic novels, and recommended reading lists. Support college preparation among high school students by focused materials and, again, continuing the college-bound programs for this group. We'd like to explore ways to better publicize and extend library services into all wards of the city through the use of listservs and perhaps some programming as well, if we can find a way to do that with our current staff. We want to create and nurture community connections through library programs, such as attracting new parents to our LapSit program, English and Spanish speakers to our Spanish Circle Time, and parents and children to our craft programs. That's something else that we've been doing a lot of this past year. We intend to support literature and the arts through special programs in partnership with the Friends of the Library, such as the Favorite Poem Night, the reading group for adults, and we help to support the Poetry Walk over the last 2 years as well. And again, I mentioned also building on the increases in library use, registered borrowers, and program attendance. That's something we hope we can certainly maintain and perhaps increase. In the Computer Learning Center, one thing we're interested in doing is pursuing ways of offering training and instruction to a number of user groups, all user groups and all ages in the Computer Center. We've just recently planned some digital art workshops for children ages 9 to 13. One is going to be on photo art and one on comic art, and they're being taught by a new employee who works during the evenings who has considerable background and experience in art, art administration, graphic arts, and is eager to do this. So we're just going to be experimenting with some week-long workshops for kids through the summer and see how that goes. We're facilitating computer access by the acquisition of scanners, so people don't have to, key in their library cards. We have scanners in the library now, and we're hoping that we'll be able to acquire them in the computer center over time as well. So those are about the highlights. I don't want to dwell on that for too long. I'd like to respond to your questions or address any part of the budget that you're particularly interested in hearing about.
If I can just check on one item that came up last week.
Okay.
There was a question about in the capital section under IT, the library userful stations, the 3-year replacement schedule.
Yes.
If you can just
yes.
tell us anything you know about that. The question came up as to whether the 3-year cycle was the right one, whether they were more likely to be useful for maybe up to 5 years.
Well, the contract generally provides for the replacement of computers after 3 years, and that we're doing. Actually, we have just done in the library, and so that we've had it's one computer for the workstations in the library, plus the people at Userful provide support and maintenance and replacement of anything that breaks throughout the 3-year period. But at the end of the 3-year cycle, we can actually keep the computers and we can use them as backup computers, and that's what we're doing. But that was the original when we had the hearings about the computer center. Right. When they opened, that was the original plan, and that's it's possible to replace some equipment, but because we're talking about a lot of computers and potentially a lot of maintenance and a pretty small IT staff in the city, so that, this has been, this arrangement has been really helpful to us in the past, because when something breaks, we can get it replaced, and, it's sent to us in a matter of days.
So we essentially have a lease contract with them?
Pretty much. We can send the old computers back, but we can also keep them. And this cycle would call for, we got the computer for the public workstations in the library first, but in fiscal year '09, we would be replacing all the computers for the workstations in the computer center at a cost of $34,000 or possibly less, but that would be, the maximum. I think it is well worth the cost.
Okay, thanks. Any questions? Councilmember Robinson?
Hi.
Hi.
You do a lot of arts programming, or you mentioned some arts programming, and I wonder if you are in contact with the Arts and Humanities Committee and Commission as you're developing those programs.
Yes, I mean, they've helped us publicize our programs. They've been interested in having someone from the Friends of the Library on that group, and I've approached the Friends Board. I think it's partly a matter of their time. It's true that some of the work we do is very closely allied. They just do a lot more of it, we want to work with them when it's possible. They had the bathroom poetry project in our restroom. We were very proud of that. And, whenever there are opportunities for us to work with them, we...
Thanks. I'm looking for those kinds of linkages
Yes.
across departments and our committee structure.
Of course.
Another question I have is about the outreach to our Spanish-speaking population.
Yes.
Do you have any ballpark guess about the value of the services that you offer our Spanish-speaking population as a percentage of your budget or as a percentage of the programs that are offered? Anything? Because
you're talking about a dollar value.
A dollar value, maybe that's impossible to estimate. But we have CASA of Maryland, for example, coming to us and asking for funding, and it might be valuable for us to consider that as we're thinking about what the services that we do offer the Spanish-speaking population in our...
I don't think I could put a dollar value on it. I can tell you that the use of the library in all respects by the Spanish-speaking population has, and this is anecdotal, but it's been growing. I mean, we have right now a native Spanish speaker on the staff, and people, know her schedule, and they come in to, get help when she is on duty, because she is very fluent, obviously very fluent in Spanish. Some of us know a little bit.
The word is out. The word sounds like the word is out in the Spanish-speaking population that you have support services for them.
Yeah, and the programs are attended by, I have to, the Spanish Circle Time, I have to say, is attended by all kinds of people. Some native Spanish-speaking families, as well as families that are not native Spanish-speaking, that have Spanish-speaking caregivers, as well as people who, who simply want that kind of exposure. But the person who offers, Lupe Marks, who offers the programs, is an educator, again, a native Spanish speaker. She's very energetic. She does this well, and she's attracted a wide audience. So it's really all kinds of people, but I couldn't even tell you the numbers of people.
Or a percentage of effort or anything like that. I mean, like just 5% of the library's time and energy.
Well, some of, we spent time on acquisitions, and some of that acquisitions is, bilingual or, Spanish materials, but that's time we would spend on acquiring other kinds of materials,
and
although...
Is it your goal to expand the Spanish-speaking outreach and programs?
Yes, it really is. I think we have to respond to that demand in the community. In fact, our Spanish-speaking staff person, Lucia, was involved in a workshop, and that's somewhere in the literature you got, that, she was involved in the planning of an area-wide workshop that had to do with services to Spanish-speaking people in the area and the different ways you can, I was at work, I couldn't attend it, but people on the staff did, and she brought back a lot of materials. It helps put us in touch with vendors for some of these materials, and yeah, I mean, we have a limited space. We're a small library, but we already have a small collection of Spanish materials for adults, several Spanish magazines. We're going to get more, and a larger collection for children. So.
Okay, and I've saved my heart's question for last, and you don't have to answer it at length because I know I'm taking time.
That's
but,
okay.
We have continuing discussions with the county about what services and that we offer that the county doesn't reimburse us for. Of course, you know that's the TASD study was one of the initiators of that, and the library is not considered a county library. It's our own independent, and as I understand it, the only independent library in the state of Maryland. And it sounds like you're doing some very creative things and some things that are maybe on the cutting edge. And I wonder if some of those things would be helpful to us, or maybe you've talked with City Manager Matthews about ways she can discuss those things that we provide that they don't in the county. And I don't need you to tell me details now. I guess need some reassurance that you're making those points to our city manager and keeping them in mind as we negotiate with the county.
I think what we are doing, and this is just addressing a little piece of your question, which is a big question, is using the flexibility we have as an independent library to seek out ways that we can be creative and respond to the constituents and the patrons we see out there. And, you know, we don't have a huge bureaucracy with many, many layers. You know, it's the boundaries between, you know, what people ask for and, you know, me or any of my staff working at the desk, you know, they're really thin boundaries. We know immediately what people are asking for, and you know, I think that's a good thing. And you know, we look at that all the time because we're very aware that as an independent library, we have to keep ourselves viable. You can't be static, and you know,
it might be, maybe you already have this, it might be helpful to have some sort of success stories or stories that make you special that we compile and that we on the council know about, so and that you inform us about, so that we can have that conversation if it comes up with us at the county level, that we can say, look, here are 10 things that we do that your counties just don't, and the reason is that we're independent, we're more flexible, we're nimble, and so forth. So I just sort of throw that
I get
out
it.
to you.
I understand. Thank you.
Other comments or questions, Councilmember Siemens, followed by Councilmember Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm impressed with the Spanish language programs that you put in and your work on trying to address that segment of the community that speaks Spanish and is not as fluent in English. The majority of my constituents who don't speak English also don't speak Spanish, and I wondered what steps you're taking to serve those populations that speak other languages.
Well, we do have a native French speaker on our staff as well. He's been there for some time, and you know, he works with. He's from the Cameroon, so he deals with a lot of the West African people who use the library, and he's translated some materials for us. We have a bookmark in Spanish now. I mean, in French now, which we didn't have before. We only had Spanish. So, you know, as far as some of the other languages, now we don't have people on our staff that can.
You know, the subject that I brought up a number of times over the years has been our use of volunteers. I think this is one area where volunteers can be very useful to the city. I think people who have the common bond of a common language, especially in a foreign land, are, you know, interested in helping their neighbors who have the same you know, common bond.
That's
and
right.
I think it would be a workable solution to have volunteers who do speak Amharic or Russian or whatever the other languages are. We have a very large Amharic-speaking population here along Maple Avenue, and I know that they would be tickled to be able to use the great resource that you have with the library. My other question is, I know the biggest void that I hear about from my constituents is English as a second language. They really, many residents who don't speak English would like to, and many of them don't have the transportation or the money for transportation to some of the other areas to get the English as a second language courses. Have you thought about incorporating that into your programs?
We did teach English as a second language for a while. We did that several years ago, and it was through someone who did volunteer her services. She had experience and was trying to acquire more. She did it in the mornings, and it was difficult for her to capture people at that time, and and it was difficult to get them to come regularly. And eventually, she just got a full-time job somewhere else. So that was that. And I know I believe the Recreation Department has attempted that. I don't know with what degree of success. You know, we're open to it. I agree with you. The need is there, and they offer. You know, we certainly refer people to the discussion groups that they have at many county libraries, and the Montgomery County Adult Education now offers English ESL classes through Montgomery College, and some of the more advanced ones I think can be costly, but I believe the beginning ones are free of charge. So, and we're trying to build our collection of ESL materials. We're trying to do that all the time, so that's somewhat helpful.
Great. And then lastly, I just wanted to suggest that for any of your programs where you're trying to attract adult population, I think it's good to think about having a youth program at the same time, because many of the adults that might want to come to the programs frequently have young people that would distract, especially if it's an English as a second language or some other type of class. It would be nice to have the parallel class or at least program for the young people.
Right. Well, I would certainly, my observation has been that family programs are the most successful in the library. That's not exactly what you were saying, but programs in the evening where parents can come with their kids and it can be a shared activity seems to be particularly successful here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Wright.
First, I would just say to Councilmember Robinson, probably one of the unique things about our library is that it's walkable, that people can walk to it. Probably, I'm not certain, but I bet if you looked across the county, if it's not the number one in terms of, if you looked in a half or quarter mile radius in terms of population that could walk to it, I bet it might be number two. And in terms of carbon footprint, that's pretty important. And also, if you looked at the population within that half mile and the mix of incomes in there, it's probably pretty unique. One question I had was, do we have a breakdown of, because you can get a card even if you're not a city resident, right? You can get a library card if you're not a city resident.
Anybody can get a library card. Library cards are free to residents of Montgomery County and people who attend school in the city or work in the city. And everybody else has to pay a non-resident fee.
Do we have a breakdown of residents versus residents, meaning Tacoma Park residents versus Montgomery County residents?
That information is available. I don't have it with me. I'd be glad to provide it.
That'd be great. And do you have a sense, have you ever seen circulation numbers from any of the county libraries? I'd be curious how our circulation and...
It's huge. I mean, you're talking about big libraries with, much... I don't have a figure. I know it's substantially larger than ours. You're talking about larger libraries with much, much larger collections and budgets. I think our budget for materials is sufficient for a library of this size, but you're talking about something really different. I mean, we're a community library, and those are the needs we respond to, and, we're thrilled that, those increases are taking place, but I don't think they would compare with the county branches around us. We also have, I would add to that a lot of our use is not circulation. It's people who use the library, whether it's for the internet or just, that's why we have a statistic on in-library use of materials. People come in, do their homework, look at stuff, and leave, and I think that population who doesn't necessarily borrow as much is probably increasing. But that may be, I'm sure that's true for some other libraries too in the county.
And I noticed you have these self-scanners now at public workstations. Those aren't to check books out, though. Those are just...
No, they're to, you use your library card to access the public internet, and you used to have to manually enter everything. And we had scanners. We've always had scanners in the senior room. And now we have them in the library. It's just more efficient and a convenience for patrons. And you know, we'd like at some point to have them in the computer center too.
Have we ever thought about self-checkout models, or I know sometimes that can involve RFID as opposed to chips in the books?
Haven't really investigated it. I mean, we have 2 staff members, 2 to 3 staff members on the floor at all times. You know, that isn't a huge number, but you know, they handle circulation, and in the after-school hours, there's someone stationed in the children's room as well. I mean, self-checkout is a great thing. I don't know the costs involved, but you know, we have the service, you know, directly from staff, and it's not like a disproportionate amount of our staffing, you know, really.
Right. And then just last question is, when is the last time we increased our library fines?
It was several, maybe as much as 5 years ago. I don't know. I'd have to check on the exact year, but they were raised with approval by the council to be the same as Montgomery County. And
are they still the same today? Are they
not quite. Montgomery counties are a little bit higher for adults. Ours are 25 cents a day for adult books. There's a 35 cents a day. For children, they're the same, 10 cents a day, and Prince George's County charges less.
Thanks for answering the question. Thanks for all your hard work.
Thank you.
Councilmember Clay.
I know my daughter's paid some library fines. She was really excited about her books and keeps them too long. I just wanted to say that my ward is actually not a ward that walks to the library a lot, and it was interesting when I was campaigning. I got really varied responses about the library, but when you express to people in the community the wide variety of activities that the library actually engages in, you get a lot more support and interest from folks. In particular, I'm never cease to be amazed and impressed with how, when there's a gap in a need in community services or community activities, it's the library that steps up to fill it. And I noticed that, and I really appreciate it. And the other thing I wanted to say is that we're doing these management interviews for this leadership development program that I was in, and I got to interview this one guy and asked him, you know, what the most important thing was in good leadership, and he said, well, it's to hire good people. That's the number one thing. And repeatedly hear from people about how terrific the library staff is, and as we heard tonight, with these really varied skill sets that allow the library to be a lot of different things, to the wide variety of people who participate in community services and community activities in the city, and I think that that's due to good leadership, and I just want to say thank you.
Thank you. We're very fortunate in the staff that we have at the library, and I'll be pleased to pass on the compliment to all of them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you all.
And we will take a short break. We will come back in 10 minutes at 9:24 on the clock.
first half of my recital.
Yes.
That's like you're selling this donut. Excellent.
Oh, okay, great.
So it's your pleasure. If you'd like, we can just go through questions and...
Okay, Councilmember Clay.
I understand that there was money in this year's budget for the excitement of traffic calming.
You mean in 08?
Yeah. And I don't want to have to pressure the Long Branch Sligo folks into coming to a conclusion on their process before June 30th. So I guess my request would be that we roll those dollars over into the next budget year.
I think that's a process that the city manager can handle. We had $100,000 in the pedestrian safety initiative in
Right.
08. None of those projects have yet been started, though we assume that some of them may move a little faster than others. So there's that possibility.
Yeah, typically what we do for the benefit of the council is that if there are projects that are included in the FY08 budget, particularly capital projects, special revenue fund projects, is where this typically comes up, where the timing is off, we will just automatically carry most of those items over. That will usually appear on the final reconciliation list that comes to the council a couple weeks from now.
Well, I would just like to put that out there that they're not going to be ready by then. I had a meeting with them just before I left for Arkansas, and I knew us had 50 or 60 people there at least, and they want to spend a lot more time talking about it.
Could you just could you talk a little bit about two things related, or one thing related to the Public Works renovation? I mean, I was struck by two things. One is the improving the conditions for the workers in terms of locker rooms and workspace, and then the second was the stormwater runoff issues related to the site. And so I'm a little bit. I'd like to hear a little bit more about the problems that are there. I mean, we could see, but do you have a sense of like how much? I don't know if you call it toxic material or polluted water is created by the runoff there. It seems to be a very, very serious issue, and that alone might be a reason for doing it.
Yeah, appreciate those of you that came to the tour, particularly those that had never seen Public Works before. It can be an eye-opening walk through the city's facility. Part of the initiative, as you mentioned, Councilmember Wright, is improving workplace conditions and also improving the environmental conditions of the Public Works facility. The city's made some great strides in that regard. The salt storage facility improved a huge problem that we had up there in inadequate storage and water infiltration and whatnot. So we now have a watertight, very appropriate site for salt storage that keeps it separated and removes it from the runoff of our facility. So there's been a huge improvement there. We've got several items in the budget this year to address the Public Works situation in general. Obviously, the biggest of it one is the renovation of the facility. We do have some measures in place right now. What we'd like to do is enhance and expand upon them. When the facility was built in 1959, what you needed to make sure was that your mechanic shop had an oil-water separator that basically captured a lot of the oil contaminants from the mechanical repair work that they did. We have that. It's operable. It's still in place, and it's serving its function. However, given the other uses and requirements now around the site, there's much more that we need to do. We know where our major discharge points are into the Sligo Creek watershed. Our plan at this point is to improve grading and make sure that we're controlling the source and the flow of water through our facility, eliminating it where we can if we can keep water out, so that all we're dealing with is the rainwater and stormwater that comes from our own facilities. Also good housekeeping practices that keep some of those materials off the surface. Just simply sweeping the facility on a daily basis, which we do, removes a lot of the potential contaminants that can end up in Sligo Creek. The stormwater emphasis for managing that facility's runoff is to what we're looking at now is some filtration techniques that will be installed in two main locations where our main discharge points are. Right now there's just open channels and pipe that filter it, or that run it to the edge of our kind of plateau, and then it runs down the hillside and eventually into Sligo Creek. So we could circumvent that by putting a filtration station at that point where you would have the ability for settling of some of the sediment materials like that, but you'd also have filtration of some of the contaminants in the water. And this filtration system is a kind of a live and active system in that you clean it, you maintain it, you check out what's going on, so you know it's not like something that you put in and leave. It's kind of like a water filtration system. If you're trying to remove contaminants from your drinking water, you've got to change your carbon filter in order to keep it working. It's the same kind of thing with these filtration devices. So we would have one located pretty much right in our facility, which is one main discharge point. We would have another located just outside the facility where our mulch pile and the waste oil facility currently are located, to make sure that we're collecting and decontaminating, doing quality as well as quantity control on that stormwater discharge. So those aspects would be assumed to be included in the renovation project. The stormwater budget also includes some funding for some of those items so that they could actually precede it. We could get going on that and not wait in the event that renovation of the facility ends up being more complex or complicated. We have put some funding aside in the stormwater budget. When we go through that, I can identify those projects. So particularly those stormwater filtration systems could get installed on site, soon after the beginning of the fiscal year, so we wouldn't have to delay that, and we could start improving our water quality right away. One of the things that you probably noticed that we don't have up at Public Works, and it would be considered a requirement, is a truck washing station, basically. So you could collect any of the contamination that you wash off the trucks daily. So that would certainly be part of a new facility. We'd locate the place where that could be. We'd have it constructed so that you could capture, contain, and then filter and clean the washing water that's used for those vehicles. And in some cases, depending on what technology we end up using, you can reuse that water, and there's an ability to either use it in other places or reuse it in a washing capacity once you've filtered it and cleaned it and recharge it back in the system. So those are some of the stormwater aspects of the renovation. The other piece of the renovation is that building was built in 1959, the outside of it. My understanding is that employees actually built the center sort of storage area where our trash trucks are parked. One of the first things you'll notice when you walk up there is all our trucks are sticking outside the roof cover. Trucks have gotten bigger, and our facility has stayed the same size, so we're in dire need of expanding not only the size of our existing coverage, and sometimes it's just extending the roof. Trash trucks stick out now 4 or 5 more feet than they used to. So it's just making sure that we have a covered lot for those. The other thing is that we have more equipment now. Doing the business of the city requires more pieces of mechanical equipment than it used to. And we would like to keep as much of that under stored coverage as possible. So one of the ultimate goals of the construction would be to enhance and increase the amount of storage space, covered storage space we have, not necessarily heated or cooled, but just facility equipment storage. So that'll be a big goal of the facility. And lastly, our locker rooms are ancient and fairly unused because they're just not conducive to the type of locker room facilities that most employees would expect to use. There's also not much room for gathering space, staff lunchroom, that kind of thing. So another goal of the renovation would be to get rid of our existing locker room facilities, turn them into more usable space, and create a more appropriate locker room and kind of staff lounge area for lunches or meetings or whatnot within the compound itself. I know another thing that I've heard from the neighbors surrounding the facility is to improve the aesthetics of what they have to look at. And to that end, I think there's some things we can do in terms of changing the way some of our fence line and gate lines run so that we could screen some of the storage areas we have down at the end of the road where the road ends. And we currently have a dumpster for street sweeping and other debris. We could basically screen that from the public and enhance kind of the area that we park back there and allow us a little more space and a little more screening for the neighborhood. So those are some of the basic pieces of the goal. We also need, of course, to look at things like the heating and cooling system within the facility. Any cooling that happens up there is done with window units that are, cut into the walls. We did do an insulation project up there in the mid-'90s. We also renovated all the lighting and the windows, which used to be original and a real energy inefficient. So some of that has been improved, and in some degrees the buildings themselves wouldn't be touched. Those that are currently functioning and working have good windows, have decent lights. We probably could do even more in the insulation factor, and that's what we'd be looking for an architect to come in and tell us what else we could do. Our heating system is a boiler system with underground water pipes that run fan coil units within each of the different buildings. There's probably more efficient ways to do that now. We also have had a situation with the administrative building within Public Works where those old pipelines have corroded and became unworkable, and so we're separate from the main boiler and had to have separate heat put into that facility. So we need to bring people in with expertise on how you heat and cool those kinds of facilities efficiently. Another thing you notice when you walked around is all our heating units are way up high in these high ceilings, whereas the employees are way down here working on cars. So anything we can do to sort of reverse the location of the heat source with heat coils on the floor and whatnot, which may be very appropriate in our mechanic shop, so that we could lessen the amount of heat that has to be pumped out, as well as put it where the employees are, and improve the working conditions in that way. So, people with a background in these kinds of utility function sort of oriented spaces can tell us what the best options are now for heating, cooling, as well as seeing what we have to store and making those kind of suggestions and arrangements.
On the stormwater, what sort of event are we planning for? 10-year, 20-year? What sort of event would we plan for in our stormwater setup?
I would need to talk to the city engineer to get exactly what the anticipation is. I know the requirements now from the county are fairly low, 1- and 2-year events. We don't design to those standards any of the stormwater systems or infiltration systems that we've been doing locally around the city. We go much higher than that to 10, and in fact on Cleveland Avenue, the 100-year storm. So I would say we would have an intention of going beyond the 10-year event and into something much larger. Given the location of where we are, we don't have the danger ourselves of flooding, but we do have what we're putting on downstream, and we need to make sure that whatever filtration and capturing we're doing of our pollutants isn't going to be such that, the 10-year storm overwhelms our system and flushes it all down to Sligo Creek. So we would be trying to extend beyond that.
Okay, I want to make sure we were trying to cover non-capital, non-stormwater questions first.
Non-capital, non-stormwater, capital like trucks.
Yeah, so we're trying to do general fund stuff first. We didn't exactly go there, but
if you'd like, I could hit you with the highlights of some of what I think are notable items in that category, unless you want to stick to the questions.
We'll stick to questions if people have general fund stuff.
Does that count the renovation? Or?
You're next if you got general fund stuff.
I think it's general fund stuff. I know you went to ICLEI in Albuquerque, and it's really unfortunate I didn't get to go. So I'm looking forward to having a debrief session with you, so I can take advantage of your experiences there and what you learned. Councilmember Wright put in an environmental climate change position on the reconciliation budget, and I think I'll go out on a limb here and say that people in the city and staff, at least what I've heard, is that they consider you the resident geek on numbers on what our current carbon footprint is, and not only at Public Works but in other parts of the city, this building, for example. And because environmental sustainability is important to all of us, and I think it's one of our priorities. There's certainly one of the staff priorities that came out there. We're very interested in tracking how that drops, how our footprint and how our energy use drops over time. So I'm looking forward in the next year to learning how many kilowatt hours we use this month compared to a year ago, this month for a year ago, and so forth, as we march forward and watch it go down. So my question really is, do you see the environmental climate change position as a valuable addition to your budget? And if not, how would you fill that role?
Well, I think without an additional position, what the city can do with what it currently does, which is, we work very hard at the programs we have, but where we have staff is where we have projects. Where we have an arborist, we can do urban forest, tree replanting, tree maintenance, and all kinds of innovative ideas that those arborists bring to the city, thinking creatively about their field. We have an engineer who does stormwater. He can capture the best of the ideas out there and implement that when we have city projects underway. Without an environmental climate change position, what you're missing is that collector of wisdoms and technology and the ability to track emissions. That just doesn't exist now. There's nobody that's able to put the kind of time and effort, and it does take significant amounts of time and effort to collect and track that data. We do a lot of things in terms of the city's own footprint. I can tell you to the month what we spend gas, water, and electric for city facilities. So we do have extensive amount of records on what we have, what it's been, what we're projecting in the future for our own city buildings. We don't do that citywide. We don't have the ability to do that for the community as a whole, or to take a look at our commercial sector versus our residential sector. Any kind of efforts in that regard would require an outside position to do. We can tell you what we're doing within city-owned buildings quite specifically, and we wouldn't need any additional staffing for that resource.
Okay. As last question, or last point, I asked Ms. Arnold Robbins about the fact that we have an independent library and that we're not recompensed by the county for the library's expenditure in large part. And that's in part also the case with our own Public Works Department. And so in the same way, I asked her to kind of come up with some special stories, cutting-edge things we do, things that help us make a case if we go to the county. It would be great to have you develop those kinds of stories that can educate us, and then as we go to the county, we can bring those along with us.
Yeah, we do differ in some significant ways in that the county does provide park funds, street sweeping funds,
yes,
street renovation funds. So there is some compensation, albeit it's tied to the county's calculations, and city manager's been working extensively on that task force.
I'm looking for substantive things that we do that they don't, or we do that we can show them that we're a leader in that regard. If we do, they have at the county council level. They have tried to make a very strong point to reduce their own carbon footprint, and it's always problematic to figure out how you're going to do that or how you're going to measure it. Sure. So anything that you can do to help us figure that out is good.
Other general fund questions?
Were those general fund questions?
Yes.
I really like the bulk tree purchase. I've heard a lot of good things about this, and I hope that it can be expanded, not just continued.
Well, we're intending to do it twice a year in spring and fall, and really those are the only 2 times a year you want to do something like that for the survival rate of the trees. I think what our focus will be and our effort will be the next time around is to better publicize, to have a longer lead time, and to really try to push it and promote it. And I think we've kind of been getting our feet wet, sort of letting the program evolve slowly over this past year. We've done it now twice. But we've got some nice tie-ins. The spring one, obviously, with Arbor Day, we can make that a large focus. And the fall, we just need to get on board with the listservs and other publicity mechanisms and let people know that it's available.
The other question I had concerned compact fluorescent lights. Do we have a disposal arrangement?
Yeah, we have a drop-off at Public Works. It was something that we set up probably over a year ago. We do have some information on the city website, and we have had articles in the city newsletter about it. It's quite simple to set up and not very expensive. Basically, the arrangement we have with a company called USA Lighting is they send us a pre-postage paid box. As soon as we fill the box, we tape it up, ship it to them, UPS, and they handle it all locally. Just out, I think it's in Bladensburg or Hyattsville is their plant location. And so, we have no problem continuing that relationship and expanding it. So that is available right now up at Public Works
But folks have to go to Public Works.
to drop off the bulbs.
Yeah. Would it be possible to consider other drop-off points?
It's possible. It gets a little bit, there's a little bit of concern about expanding the potential drop-off sites just because of the nature of the item itself. If a bulb were to be broken or if it were to be vandalized, then you potentially expose people to the mercury and the metals within the bulbs. So by having it up at Public Works, it's fairly close to anybody in the city. And we're kind of prepared to handle what's there, and it's outside of a normal work environment in that it's not in an office setting. It's kind of more a utility setting.
A related question is, I've heard that there are other kinds of highly efficient bulbs, like LEDs and so on. Do you know if the technology, what's the kind of guess on when
Oh, the
LEDs
LEDs
are
are amazingly huge difference in energy use. We have LED lights for all our decorations that we have on the city building. That was a purchase that was made when the decorations were intended to be there. And they use just a fraction of the wattage that normal, holiday decoration lights would be. I've been trying to gather information on LED streetlights. There's a lot of difference of opinion right now. When you talk to people around here locally, they say the technology is not quite there yet.
That's what I was wondering.
At the ICLEI conference, it was all over the place with huge cities with LED streetlight programs. So I'm not sure if that translates into we don't have the distributorship mechanism set up down here or the companies that are producing them quite in line. But there's cities all over the country that have relamped entire sections of streetlights with LED streetlights. So I need to, just continue to dig deeper into that.
Are they better than compact fluorescents?
Well,
What are
the
what are
LEDs,
differences?
you get a little bit of mix and match with lighting. Different lighting styles were developed for different functions. And so sometimes just the nature of what it's used for limits how it can be used and the type of ballast and whatnot it needs to fire it up. So there's some limitations based on that. My understanding of the LEDs is that they have a fairly wide scope of ability to be used in multiple different functionalities, so they tend to be a little more, have a little more options. There's been a lot of development around the CFLs as well, the compact fluorescents. Now you'll see that there's CFLs within floodlights and other things, so the industry is continuing to evolve. I don't know, I can't compare wattage output to energy in my head. I don't know what that is. We can find that out and take a look at that. Just so you know, the city has been working on street lighting issues for our decorative street lights for quite a while, and we first relamped our street lights to high-pressure sodium because it reduced the energy as well as improved the longevity in the Old Town section. We went through a process with ICLEI with the whole mapping of our carbon footprint and brought in resources that talked about induction lighting as a direction to go in. And so we relamped many of our decorative street lights and in fact used induction lamps for the Carroll Avenue lights, the ones that are going to be put up on Holton Lane, the ones on Lee Avenue, all the decorative street lights. And the benefit there is not only reduced energy use, but they also have an incredible long life, 100,000 hours, which is about 10 times what you get with other types of street lights. So there's many kinds of things that you have to keep in mind with the street lights. We have a project in this capital budget to redo the decorative street lights in Tacoma Junction. We're planning to use an induction style light there to match the existing lights on Carroll Avenue. It'll be a huge improvement both in maintenance as well as light levels and appearance and in less energy use. I have not spec'd that out in an LED framework, so we just don't know if that option exists. We were planning all along to do the induction lights because of the long life and the reduced energy.
I think it would be helpful to write a short article about the experience with these, because I get a lot of questions from folks, what light should I use and so on. And the city now has some experience with these different kinds of lighting. People could do it in their own homes if they knew that X was better than Y. It would be helpful. So even if it's a paragraph or two in the newsletter, I think it actually would be pretty well received.
I'm going to go with a couple general fund questions. The estimates that you put in the budget for fuel costs, are you comfortable that you built in the right factor for those?
Well, my crystal ball got foggy years and years ago, so we're always using best-case scenarios, and I talk with my peers at COG who also are in similar situations trying to project out their fuel costs, not only vehicle fuel, but also municipal building use fuel. It's a little bit of a wing and a prayer. I wouldn't want to stand, that wouldn't be the number I'd stand on and say, I am absolutely certain this number of my budget. There are many others that I would, but the utility costs and the fuel costs are a moving target and so dependent on what happens internationally that it's hard to know. We have the best contract we can have through the Council of Governments and the cooperative purchasing we do for our gasoline. The diesel fuel, we have a separate independent contract because we buy biodiesel, and there hasn't been a COG contract worked out for that. Hopefully that will change because many other municipalities in the COG area are now using biodiesel, so that may assist us in terms of reducing costs or limiting the increases. Basically what you can do, you kind of shave a little wedge off the price increases as they come. But the contracts all have an ability to raise the price due to conditions, and our prices go up much less than what you're paying at the pump yourselves, but we do.
So
you can see how much I was off last year in this year's in the 08 budget. So I don't know if we did a better job guessing in 09. One of the other things, and I guess I'll just plug, is I was thinking about it before the ICLEI conference, and I certainly got kind of charged up again at the ICLEI conference. I think there's a lot we can do for city vehicle use in terms of no idling policies, which we've never really enforced or pushed, shared use of vehicles. Sat in a lot of workshops where public works departments talked about how they reworked their vehicle fleet to add cabs so that you didn't have to take 2 trucks to a site, just 1 truck, additional seating. So I think there's some evaluation and analysis that we could do, and I would like to do that in public works just as kind of a little pilot test case about what we could do. And I think we're probably the biggest piece of that in terms of the idling as well as the multiple vehicle trips to get to one work site. I don't think you see that in many other departments, and I don't know that we could ask that of the police department given the nature of the response that they're trying to do. So we're probably the best and the most place that you'll get that. I'm hoping that if what I've heard from other experiences plays out in Tacoma Park, we'll see a significant reduction of several percentages just in terms of no idling alone for the vehicle use. So we're going to try to implement that internally and track it so we can basically know what we're doing now and then see what we can attribute to some of the policy use changes we'd like to experiment with.
Good. Is your sense that in spite of your best efforts, we'll end up spending more on fuel than we budgeted for?
I'm hoping that we'll spend what we budgeted for. I mean, that's always, I put together a number that I think is realistic and accurate and not trying to, sort of lowball it. I really think that's what it's going to be.
And it was good to hear you talk about the possible change in some policies for use, because that's a real simple way to get more efficient. And I heard a number of instances on the news just today where jurisdictions in this area around Frederick and Hagerstown are looking at much more drastic curtailment of use of things, including possible restrictions on vehicles in parades, like fire trucks and things like that, where they're saying, no, don't send them to the parades because that burns it up and we got to watch every penny.
Well, it does really, it's an eye-opening experience to go through. This year, for instance, because of the increase in cost, we limited our mulch deliveries to a 30-mile radius. We might not have made people happy that we're 40 miles away, but we decided it just wasn't worth both the gas as well as, didn't nearly cover the cost. So we're taking those steps to try to focus and prioritize what we do.
Okay. And I had just let me make sure I understand the WSSC match money. We got the memo. Thank you very much. I just want to make sure that I've got it. That essentially when WSSC does their work in a roadway, and the condition of the road is such that it's better rather than worse, WSSC pays 50% of the cost of mill and overlay of that street. We bank the money, we essentially segregate it and put that amount of money for that particular street aside, wait till the street comes up in the order of things, and then we have the money set aside to do 50% of the cost of doing that. In your experience, does the WSSC work and the temporary or permanent patch that they apply then change in any significant way the amount of time that the street might hold up? Does the place of that street in the order change and how often do we kind of regrade our streets?
Well, we don't have a lot of track record on this because actually this kind of effort that we're seeing in WSSC has really ramped up over the past 3 years way more significantly than it was before. And in fact, our rules changed the last time WSSC was in to do major water main work. We didn't have the utility agreements and we didn't have the 50-50 cost share, so we just ate the cost of resurfacing that street when we needed to. Those negotiations probably started about 7 years ago, and getting a cost share, and WSSC was willing to do that. It is our assumption, and one of the reasons that we were successful in getting the 50-50 cost share is that any street that's been cut up for utility work is going to deteriorate faster than a road that wasn't. If you have a road with no cuts in it versus a road with cuts in it, the road with cuts is going to deteriorate faster just because water gets in and it does what it does to pavements. So that's part of the assumption behind that, that the road will not last the 20, 25 years that we would assume it will probably be in the 12 to 15-year range before it's really of the condition that it needs to be milled and resurfaced.
Okay. And just for your information, for the block that I'm most familiar with, which I have passed along numerous pieces of information about that block.
There's still no speed hump.
There's still no speed hump. But it's also that as they filled in their trench for all of the water line replacement, even in the places where they cut through concrete base, they went back with the asphalt base.
Right.
So that what we ended up with in some places was not what we had to start with.
Less than, yes. WSSC will swear that a correctly compacted asphalt base will hold up as well as a concrete, but I see you share my skepticism.
They can swear all they want. I'll swear back at them.
And Bruce, does this go for sidewalks as well? If they cut through sidewalk, put in asphalt, then what happens?
Yes, we haven't had a cost share arrangement with them because it tends to be fairly localized and kind of a couple of pieces at a time, and the assumption is there that any concrete, either curb, gutter, or sidewalk that they take out, they put back. That has been a challenge with some of the utilities in the past, and that can happen not with a big scale water main or sewer line replacement. It could just happen when someone wants to add gas and they don't have it. So you see a lot of those around the city, and we try to keep records on that and stay in touch with our utility contacts to get them to come back and pour. But anytime they replace concrete, take out concrete, they're supposed to put it back. The problem always is that the crew that does the work is not the crew that does the final work, so that's assigned to sometimes an outside contractor or a different crew within the utility, and getting them back out and getting them on schedule, because I imagine they have a huge long list that they're working through, can prove to be kind of the squeaky wheel phenomenon. You got to keep bugging them.
And if I can just note that it appears that it's possible that State Highway may be paying a little attention to Carroll Avenue. Finally, as I drove down Carroll Avenue today, there were two separate areas where there appeared to be State Highway trucks and or crews. I didn't actually see them addressing the most egregious areas, but at least they had trucks on the street.
That's good.
So I'm a little more hopeful than I was before when there was no evidence that they wanted to do anything.
Right. Well, in our last series of email exchanges, and I think WSSC finally very clearly said they're not our potholes, and basically publicly let State Highway know that they needed to have their maintenance crew out there doing the work. So it was a little bit of a finger pointing for a while.
Okay. Other general fund questions? Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you for being here tonight at this hour. And you should relish in the fact that you're not last. I'm not sure whether I'm going to stay within the boundaries the mayor set, but I'm going to try to. One thing that I appreciate is the enhancements that you made several years ago to the oil recycling station, and that improved what was, but it's still far from being an appropriate station. And I know that the state has some responsibilities that they're not fulfilling at this point, but I would say that the city has a responsibility to contain the oil and other chemicals that are dumped there. And I'm not sure that that's something that should wait for the renovation. I think that's something that could be done sooner rather than later and should be done.
We do have funds in the capital budget specifically for that, $10,000 itemized for that.
Great, appreciate that. The second item I wanted to mention is the tool library, the infamous long-gone tool library. It's a resource that the city no longer has. However, the trailer that the community agreed to put along the road in our neighborhood, because it was a good community thing to do, is now an eyesore and growing older and looking worse day by day. I would like to know when that's going to be removed from there.
Well, if you've looked at it recently, you see there's been some activity, though, albeit given the season, it's not one that we can put a lot of time into right now. But the underneath of the trailer has been removed, all the wooden lattice. The plants that were added to screen and enhance the appearance have been removed and relocated in preparation for pulling it out. We now need to get the appropriate equipment to jack it up, put the wheel back on, and tow it out. We plan to tow it up to our facility and put it beside the existing right-of-way structure. So we'll serve it it'll serve as a storage facility for us. But I would say we were hoping by the end of this month, but certainly in June. If not in May and June, we'll get that moved. It's going to require some special equipment and some time.
I appreciate that. The community will appreciate that.
Yeah.
It's time for it to go. And the other one, and I'm not sure, you can tell me if we still are in the boat business. Do we still have a boat parked over
there? The boat is still parked in our employee parking area. The police are doing what they need to do to get that released.
Could you refresh my memory on when that was put in there?
It's probably, I'm guessing, at least a year and a half ago. A boat was abandoned on Sligo Mill Road. A boat and a trailer. It didn't just get there by itself.
Bring it to me.
No, it's not a functional boat. It's been, all the there is no engine. All the controls have been cut out. The hull of the boat is pierced in numerous places. It's not a seaworthy vessel. At any rate, it was dumped at Sligo Mill Road. My staff towed it off-site and brought it to Public Works, thinking that was the best thing to do, given that trash attracts trash. On hindsight, the better thing would have been to leave it there, to tag it, to let it go through its impounding process and get it impounded. The police were involved originally. It kind of fell off the radar. We've got it back on the radar again, and they're going through the very formal legal process of getting a piece of equipment deemed unwanted or unclaimed, and then you go through the process of disposal. So that's in the works, and I can check with the police to see if they have a target date of when we'll be able to dispose of that.
I appreciate that, and also I would ask the city manager to watch this item, because property management has not been our strongest suit in the past. Appreciate that.
Any other general fund questions? Capital. lots of capital in this area.
Lots of capital, okay.
Did you want me to start with questions?
Sure.
Thank you. We've gotten off on the relocation plans a couple of times this evening, and that is in the capital budget. And I would like to make the observation that the neighborhood that the Public Works facility is in was probably an appropriate neighborhood at the time that it was originally put there, but it's a residential neighborhood with houses selling for $750,000 now. It is the location of the Public Works facility on top of a ridge overlooking a stream valley is, as you've said a couple of times, presented some challenges environmentally. I think given today's the price of properties, that property would be very attractive and would bring a good ticket price for a residential neighborhood. And it would be more appropriate to move the Public Works facility to a neighborhood that is more industrial or commercial in nature, such as along the New Hampshire Avenue corridor. And I bring this up this time because the renovations that you have discussed here tonight are very expensive. The facility that we have now is pretty dilapidated. And so I think this would be the right time to talk about relocating the facility rather than just continuing, fixing it up, but continuing the problems that have grown in this residential neighborhood. I wondered if you have given any thought to that, if you have checked into that at all.
Sure. We discussed that with the Ritchie Avenue Citizens Association. I've also discussed it with the city manager. I don't know if she or I should best respond. There's several factors that affect something like that. As far as I'm aware, the footprint size that we need for our Public Works facility, which even now is small, if you were designing a new one, you wouldn't put it on the size spot that we have. I'm not aware of land available that size on New Hampshire Avenue or anywhere else in the city of Tacoma Park. So finding a appropriate area of land that's usable for a Public Works facility is a challenge, and we did look at that 10 years ago or so. I can remember with the previous Public Works director kind of looking over aerial maps, trying to think where, if there would be a place where it might be. So there's that issue of available space. The New Hampshire Avenue corridor is one that the city is looking to for economic development, to capture a large swath of that and make it government-owned, non-tax generating land. Might be seen as a trade-off that just wasn't worth it. So those are decisions that you all have to make.
But the current trade-off is not worth it either. So.
Yeah, those are decisions that the council would have to look at and determine. I know that we have not yet ever been able to identify appropriate space, size-wise, within the city for a facility. Purchasing that land anywhere in the city, not only where we're currently located, as you all know, there's probably no place in the city where land is not expensive. So those are some of the challenges that.
What would you wager it would cost if we got the land for free, say? What would you wager it would cost to construct a new Public Works facility?
I don't know. We could, talk with folks with some background in that, other cities that have recently built facilities or replaced facilities, and get a sense of what that is. My guess is it would be in the $5 million range just to start from scratch, basically because you have to start out and meet all state and federal and local requirements. Part of the other issue, which I hope is not the case, but if we were to remove ourselves from the existing site, there would be significant decontamination, or at least testing towards decontamination that would need to be done. We do have underground tanks, a 12,000-gallon gasoline tank, 5,000-gallon diesel tank. Those would have to be either decommissioned or removed. We already know about the situation around the used oil recycling, so that is an area that we're going to be addressing anyway, so it shouldn't have an impact on that. I don't know that historically there was anything else done in that facility in any other location, so I don't think we'd have to worry about other hidden tanks or underground items that, places where they used to do things that we don't anymore. But it would certainly be an issue. relative to selling that facility. You'd have to decontaminate it and bring it up to certain standards and go through the process of testing to make sure that it indeed was clean upon transfer.
The other thing that you had mentioned, I would just like to make sure that we're clear on the driveway grade along Ritchie Avenue.
Driveway?
The grade of the driveway, the entrance into the Public Works facility off of Ritchie Avenue is too steep for the current size trash trucks and some of the other vehicles to use when they're loaded. And that forces the big trucks to use the the more densely populated residential street on Oswego. And I know that you have talked about, as part of the renovation, regrading that entrance so it could be used. Are you?
I hadn't anticipated changing the grade of the Ritchie Avenue side. We could ask the architect to look at that and tell us what's possible. Given that the road is at its existing grade and our facility climbs up, I mean, other than making a step thing, I don't know.
So you're saying that would still remain a problem then?
Yeah, I'm not anticipating a change in that, the grade of that driveway.
Is it the grade that you're asking about, or is it the dip at the bottom? My sense was that they hit coming in.
What I'm asking is, we want the vehicles using the Ritchie Avenue entrance and exit from the facility rather than the Oswego Avenue. And
well, we can certainly add that to the design criteria. My only thought is if we could widen somehow, you know, basically what you need to do instead of doing a straight 90-degree turn, some kind of angle, you know, in that could work up the grade. I don't know if we have enough land, but we'll certainly
So the percentage grade is the issue?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, both the percentage and the turn, you know, basically you're coming down, you have to make a 90-degree turn either to go down or up the hill. So there's several compounding factors. It's the tightness of the turn, it's the angle of the grade. Some of our vehicles can go out and not in, some can go in and not out, some can go unloaded but not loaded. It just sort of depends on the situation for each truck. The ones that have the most difficulty are the trash truck with our cart lifters. When we have our cart lifters on the rear truck and the truck is loaded, it can't go down without damaging the lifters.
And the alternative is a very small, narrow street with Oswego that has residential homes along it.
The other aspect of that is any delivery that we have in a tractor trailer has to come through Oswego. It cannot come up Ritchie Avenue. So, you know, we don't get extensive amounts of deliveries in tractor trailers, but we do get some. Fuel tanks, of course. Anytime fuel is delivered, it has to come through that way.
And then the other thing I want to mention, you talked about the aesthetics and the appearance, some of the changes that you're going to put in, and I would guess that some of that is maybe not going to be, not going to have to wait until the renovation, but work that you have included now in the general fund. I'm sorry. Is that part of the renovation project, or is that something that can be done, as you said, with the oil recycling station? That can be done now?
I do have funds in the next year's budget for the used oil tank. We do have some funds in this year's budget to do some gate work. We'll have to see how far we can get with that, whether or not we can cover, you know, changing the gate location across the bottom. We're still getting price quotes and working with the IT staff to get that figured out. So I don't know. I don't have any separate funds other than the gate and security money in 08 and the monies that I have in 09.
And then lastly, I would like to mention one of the reasons why renovation really doesn't work and relocation does, and that is the smell of the facility, especially in regards to the mulch pile. The mulch stinks. It's, you know, rotting organic material, and as it's moved around and uncovered and everything, it gives off a obnoxious odor that is right there in a residential neighborhood. And I don't see, short of getting rid of our mulch business, I don't see a solution to that other than relocating it to an area that is not in a residential area.
Yeah. Just another thing for those of you who weren't around, we didn't always deliver mulch And in fact, we used to dump our leaves over the hillside into Sligo Creek. Now we're talking 15 or more years ago. So the mulch pad was created in the mid-'90s to provide us an area where we could offload. In that time, we took a look at other options, shipping out leaf collection, basically the leaves we collect during leaf collection to the county facility. And the cost would more than double my solid waste budget in order to do that hauling of the leaves that we collect in the fall, because we collect 2,000 tons of leaves, a huge volume of leaves. What you see in the mulch pile now is a third volume-wise of what's collected in the November and December leaf collection program. So we collect a massive amount of leaves that have to go somewhere. If we don't deal with them on site, then we ship them to the county transfer station or to some local nursery.
Or to another ward.
Again, if there's...
Just an idea.
If I would be happy to look at any lots that have the footprint available of our facilities, we would certainly be happy to look into that.
Those are issues that I think that we'll have to face as we look at the Public Works facility later. I think it's obvious that we need to address the facility, and there needs to be something that's adequate for the staff to use, and the current facility is marginal at best.
Let me just add on the leaf mulch that one possibility that hasn't been mentioned this evening is coming up with guidelines for people dealing with their leaves on their property. Grinding them up and having their own little mulch piles. And then we can disperse the stink.
And keep it covered and it doesn't.
Councilmember Wright.
Can you see any possible way that the facility could be divided up in the sense that, because you know all the potential lots, and it doesn't seem like there's really a possible location where everything could be together. Do you see any logical way where some of the functions could be divided so we could actually have, two lots in different places in the city where that might make sense and still allow us to relocate?
Yeah. I haven't spent a lot of time evaluating it in that way. Because we have such a small staff, we do a lot of interdisciplinary work. Our right-of-way guys could drive the trash truck the next day if staff don't come in, and vice versa. So we'd lose some of that ability. So I'm guessing that the field staff really makes the most sense to stay together. Perhaps peeling off some of our more technical arborist, engineering, administrative functions could happen in a separate building than the sort of field equipment storage. But the kind of space that our administrative functions require is a fairly small piece of the whole.
And then streets are in the capital budget. So one question, a number of years ago, I guess when we did the bond, we did an evaluation of the streets and kind of prioritized. When do we look at that again, or do we revisit? Because some streets may have deteriorated.
Sure. The city engineer does an annual evaluation with criteria and re-rates each street, including the ones that were just recently renovated, in the event that there's something that comes up.
And then might we rejigger the order in which the streets should be repaved?
Yeah, based on what we call the PCI, the Performance Something Index. The calculation gives a valued rating to the condition of each street within a range of 10 or so different items that are measured. So they're evaluated against each other, come out with an index number, and then that's what we use to qualify them as either being failed or poor, or we have failed, very poor, poor, fair, good, very good, and excellent. So we have those different levels, categories within one. So yes, the street can bump from one to the other. They don't necessarily stay in the order they were originally evaluated in.
When you were at ICLEI, was there any talk about, how far out are vehicles that, hybrid vehicles or plug-in vehicles for things like trash trucks? Is it just way far in the distance, or is it something that
there are some applications, cities that are using alternative fuel vehicles. Right now, biodiesel is by far the largest alternative fuel that's used for the heavy trucks because it is so simple to make the change, and that's currently what we use.
Right.
But there is some equipment out there. I didn't get a whole lot of information about that. More what you get is cities that have that function going on, and then you contact them,
Right.
Online or through others. There's a lot of the typical things. There are some cities that are doing fuel cell cars, but basically they're in locations where there's a lab that's researching fuel cells, and they make a cooperative arrangement, or they're a very large city that's trying to, put itself out there. So we tend to be below the radar size-wise and location-wise for some of the experimenting that's going on. And the plug-in hybrids, clearly that's usually affiliated with research facilities or universities where they're doing that kind of work.
Capital?
Yes, capital. Councilmember Wright reminds me of the last item I had on my list, which is the use of, have we considered now with the gas prices increasing so rapidly, the use of low-speed vehicles, which are typically electric vehicles, but they are a separate classification as approved for use on roadways?
Yeah. We don't have an application exactly that's worked out yet. As you know, the way we replace vehicles within our fleet is the council has adopted an age and a mileage criteria, and vehicles need to meet that, or they need to be generating so many repair costs that it, exacerbates the cost of that vehicle, and it makes us recommend replacement. Because we do have a relatively small fleet size, I believe there's 73 vehicles, including police department vehicles that the city currently owns and manages. So they come up fairly slowly. The next vehicle that's on the list is the Public Works Administrative Vehicle. Again, that's not one that's meets its mileage criteria, but it's met and exceeded its maintenance cost criteria, which has led us to recommend it to be replaced. The assumption there is that we would certainly look at hybrid, but more likely an electric vehicle. And what I'd like to get is one of those type of electric vehicle with cargo capacity, so that we could use it locally within the city for any number of functions. The arborist tooling out there with a chainsaw versus the engineer going out to field visits versus the administrative functions that we have now. And so I don't know that we'll have to see if we reach a comfort level for a low-speed vehicle, because we do have the need to go to Rockville or go to Annapolis or, make the trek to Gaithersburg from time to time. And we want to, maintain the ability to do that. We do have the administrative pool that gives us some access into that. But the only sedan-type vehicle that's currently up for replacement is that Public Works vehicle, and it'll definitely be an alternative field vehicle.
Right, and it may require us to change the way that we use the vehicles. So we have those that we use in town and those that we use out of town.
Right.
And, I think of things such as the code inspectors and also the
parking enforcement
that should be looked at for the low-speed vehicles. Thank you.
Sure.
And I have one question on capital. The asphalt miller and paver has been up for inclusion in the budget a number of times. I'm not sure how many times and how far back, but my sense is it goes back a ways. And it hasn't made it in yet. You're trying to do it again this year. Make your case.
Well, I don't recall when it came up before. I guess it just was not within my range of knowledge at that point. I will say this is the first time the miller and paver combination has come in, because that's actually a fairly recent, whatever you call it, creation within the industry. What caught my eye about this piece of vehicle, this particular piece of equipment, and it wasn't the one that we initially were going to bring to the council. It was a miller that could dig to the ends of the earth, man. We had a miller demo in here that was just phenomenal. And it was also $95,000. What this piece of equipment would enable us to do is it combines the miller aspects, which is basically where you dig up the road, and it's a self-contained unit, that you take to site, and it mills the equipment. And then it also has the ability to then be loaded with asphalt and service the paver operation. So it enables, and in addition to that, it also enables the sealant that you need to use between those two steps can also be applied through this piece of equipment. So they've taken basically three types of equipment, combined it into one. The piece of equipment that we've been looking at is not the biggest, best bells and whistles one. It's really, they're more basic size. The reason that I looked hard at it and strongly recommend the city consider it is I think it'll pay for itself within a very short amount of time. Basically, any kind of major street work that we do that's not pothole filling, we have to contract out to our contractor who does work around the city. And we're basically doing 1, 2, 3 streets when we weren't using bond money. And so we're waiting for a schedule, and we either push it in the fall or we push it in the spring. And then when it's done, it's done. When the money's done, it's done. And we wait till the next fiscal year for our funding. With a piece of equipment like this, what it enables us to do is do the work when we need to do the work. It greatly expands the time frame that we could do this type of work. It also lets us control the costs because it's our staff time, once you pay for the vehicle, of course, that's dedicated to this. It also gives us the option of reusing the spoils of the milling, which I guess we could do now if we wanted to, but we'd have to work out arrangements with our contractor to, hey, let us collect that. But basically, what we did with the demonstration up at Public Works is we had the miller come through and milled. What you end up with is basically ground up asphalt, which in many cases works as a very excellent subgrade for your road. And as any of you who watch street operations here know, we've got a lot of subgrade issues where we basically are going to have to buy asphalt to bring it in, roll it out on the street to create our surface below our surface. This is, for the layer below the asphalt course. So what it would enable us to do is mill streets when we need to, mill just the portion that we need to, and I can point out any number of examples. Let's use Ritchie Avenue as an example. There's a case where WSSC came through, did a water line repair work, didn't sufficiently compact it. We've resurfaced the street, and now we have numerous areas that are deteriorating amidst other areas that are in good shape. Getting our contractor back to do that little piecemeal stuff is going to take some effort and take a while. If we had that piece of equipment, we could go in, do just the sections we need to do, mill them, save the spoils for the sub-base work that we need to do, whether or not it's within other streets or within that street itself, because we have certain places where we could store it on site.
I'm sorry, is that in this year's budget?
Oh, yes,
How
yeah.
much was that?
$90,000.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And it will just expand and enhance. I mean, one of the things that I've seen the city wrestle with over the years, sort of how much can we afford and how can we afford to maintain our streets. And the city really put itself out there a couple of years back with the bond and did a massive amount of street work and brought failed and poor and very poor streets up to an excellent condition. I think what I'm interested in is figuring out the best way to maintain all our streets in the city in good or better condition. And I think this piece of equipment would enable us to get in and fix sections of the road before the whole road starts to deteriorate or it starts to expand. And just to back up just one little more piece, when we want to do repair work now, what we have to do is bring out a concrete saw, asphalt saw, cut out the patch, take a backhoe, lift up the asphalt, bring a crew in to try to see if there's sub-base work that needs to be done, and a compaction device. And it just takes a lot of people. It takes days, to cut out a patch that's 30 by 20, probably takes the better part of 4 hours. And then it's too late at that point to go get asphalt from the asphalt plant. So you wait till the next day, get your asphalt. It takes us 2 to 4 hours to put that asphalt down. With a piece of equipment like that, you can basically time it so your miller is coming in and milling, and that job that takes us manually 2 to 4 hours to do is done in 30 to 60 minutes. And then your asphalt truck has arrived on site. You put it in the machine and you roll your street surface, right behind yourself. So it just would enable us to take a big chunk out of the maintenance work that we're going to have to do. So that's my case for that piece of equipment.
What do you anticipate number of years on the payback would be on that? Like, how quickly would it?
They tell us, 15 to 20 years, in terms of the payback. I would think that we could pay for it with what we spend for street resurfacing within 2 years, maybe 3 at the most.
So did you put a subsequently lower number into the budget on?
For the street work?
Yeah.
The money that you see in the street, the capital budget now is basically money that was established when our bond work was done. So we're basically paying off the cost of the bond, and the lesser amount in our budget relates to the $500,000 goal that the city had for street rework. I would definitely caution the city about dropping below the $500,000 as an annual goal for street work. I still think that that's the kind of level of funding, if not more, that the city needs to keep its streets in good and better condition. What this would enable us to do is deal with some of the problem areas, do some of the maintenance work. We would still have our contractor doing the major street resurfacing work on the 20-year cycle. So we'd still want to keep those funds at that level to make sure all our streets are getting done in a 20-year cycle. I wouldn't anticipate the piece of equipment that I'm trying to sell to you now to be used to do an entire street surface. It wouldn't be cost effective. It would be much better to have our contractor come in with the big subcontractors and move through and do that street. What we'd be doing is the 100 by 8 foot wide patch, numerous times on a street. We'd basically be just doing major maintenance work on streets.
And if I can just provide a 30-second primer on where we are on street repair over since about 1990, I think, was maybe the first study that I remember. It's taken us until now to get to the point where we're not falling farther behind on our street work. We tended to be cycling through and doing a street on about, I want to say, a 30-year cycle. And what we found was that we really needed to be on about a 15 to 20-year cycle, or the streets would deteriorate beyond the point, and then our costs would go way up, and we would just get farther behind.
I was just asking that question because it sounds more like this piece of equipment will allow us to have additional street repair capability as opposed to making a capital investment which would reduce an ongoing cost.
Yeah, I really see it as a maintenance tool in our toolbox. Right now, we have the crack sealer for maintenance. We could contract out slurry seal for maintenance, and we do, minor little pothole repairs. I mean, taking a look at Carroll Avenue, this is what State Highway needs to do. They need to get out, fix their little sections of the street that are bad. The rest of the street's okay. They just have some sections that are horrible. So do we on some streets, and we probably could all name the section of the street that, it's just, where, 80% of the street is okay, but there's that one area that is either sunk or eroded or due to traffic patterns, it just needs work sooner. So it would enable us to get that on a larger scale than we're able to do now.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions on capital? Stormwater. I know Mr. Silverman in the audience is happy that we finally said stormwater.
Would you see, this is my continued effort to try and figure out a way to rectify the situation at the end of Grant Avenue in a visual sense, but also realizing that it is sort of towards the bottom of the hill from a stormwater management standpoint. Would you see that as a potential site for one of the more creative solutions that you and the city engineer pioneered here in the city? Would you see that as a potential site to do so?
I would think so. I'm not familiar enough. It's been too long since I looked at Park and Planning's plans for that area. I know that there's a roundabout and a driveway entrance and various other improvements that they're planning to make to the park. So I don't have clear in my mind the space that's remaining. I think sort of what we're finding is that pretty much anything can be turned into a improvement in stormwater quality. Any kind of project has the ability to have a component that collects, filters, or allows stormwater to infiltrate, and certainly a planted swath, which is what I've heard, basically a green screen, has the potential to also be a stormwater project. I just don't know the space that's available, nor the timing right now with Park and Planning's project. It could be that there'd be an ideal fit between the two projects. There are several, oh, go ahead.
You started to talk about this a little bit earlier, and I wanted to make sure I understood that Councilmember Wright was asking about doing the filtration, stormwater handling on the Public Works site. You were planning to do that soon, basically, to get that done.
I believe the city engineer has put $15,000 to $20,000 or $25,000 into his subcontractor budget within the stormwater budget to purchase some filtration systems.
Yeah.
Two, I believe.
Because the advantage of doing it ahead of the renovation is that any water and so on the site will get into that filtration as well.
Yeah, it's a little bit of, you need to have your location really clearly figured out. And we're not a big enough site that should be too problematic. There just needs to be planning and thought put into it. I'm sure within a few feet we'll have it exactly located.
Can you just give us a quick scenario on the green roof deck?
Oh, certainly. Now, that isn't in the stormwater budget. That's in the capital budget.
I know, but it's overlap.
You all are familiar with the site. Regardless of whether or not we go with the green roof or something else, we have some major work to do out there. When the pea gravel was placed down, there was no sealant placed on the concrete nor a water barrier between the gravel and the concrete, so already we're experiencing cracking within the concrete deck, water infiltration from the exterior down to the space below. So we have a significant need to, if nothing else, remove the pea gravel, have a rubberized hot asphalt surface placed down on there, and then we could even put the pea gravel back if we wanted. But we need to do something to seal and keep water from penetrating that concrete deck. Otherwise, it's going to continue to deteriorate, and it has already begun to deteriorate. The space underneath it is parking for the most part, but then there's also a section of it that is our building maintenance, our facility maintenance supervisor's office and storage area. So he watches every day as little effervescent lines start showing up on the concrete ceiling. In addition to that, because of the pea gravel, you need to keep the pea gravel on the surface. A decision was made to put these metal, L-shaped metal pieces along the edge to contain the pea gravel. They were nailed into the concrete. Don't need to say much more about that. They're in falling off. They need to be replaced and repaired. Even if we were to keep the pea gravel in place, we need to replace the containment system that's in there because it's not made for the long haul. It's already failing. And we have situations where pea gravel is either by kids getting kicked off or by weather being knocked off the edge. So if the green roof doesn't go forward, we definitely need some funds set aside to address and correct and keep that deck from deteriorating. The ideal, if you know, that's the bad news. The good news is the option exists. It's a pretty ideal location for a green roof if the council is so inclined. It could be relatively simply converted to that use and provide an aesthetic, nice-looking, functioning surface for both the public as well as, stormwater filtration. Even the green roof would require that seal between the concrete and the surface. If it's a green roof,
It's a visual addition as well as a stormwater issue, but it's not something you can go and picnic on, am I right?
Well, I've been assuming all along that we would want to maintain certain pathways and certain sort of areas where people could go out and sit. Now, whether that's benches located or actual tables located, we can work that within the design. Okay. Basically, you create areas where you have paver systems that take people out to the location. And since we have a stairwell on the other side, assume that you'd want to provide some route through there so people could enjoy it. You know, traditional green roofs that are way up on the roof are generally sedge and fairly low growing, not ugly, but not particularly attractive. Yeah, sedum type plants. We would have to do a mix of that, whether or not we used containers as well as the ground cover type surfaces.
Is there a perceived need among staff of a place outside to go and sit and have lunch?
I know people use the picnic table, and we
Yeah.
added a second picnic table out there. So it's not heavily used, but it is used.
And the young people are always looking for a place to congregate. Right now, they sit on the wall along the library, which is not the ideal location.
And I know that when construction was going on at one point, there was an offer by a resident to provide a gazebo out there so that there was a covered place to sit with maybe a little shade and things like that. But let's just say that offer was rejected. I have to ask the rejector.
I actually asked the Recreation Department about what they would think about putting just a roof over that. I mean, if we're going to pay to seal it and everything, could you just roof it and then have, you know, kind of an open pavilion with seating under it? Would it cost any more?
You mean a roof?
Yeah.
Well, the green roof is going to be right on the deck surface.
Yeah, I get that.
Oh, okay.
But could you just put a regular roof on it? I noticed that the power lines are a little low in that area.
Yeah, I have no idea what the cost of that could be. I mean, just putting a metal cover over our used oil tank is $6,000 to $8,000, and that's for a 12 by 20 foot cover. Though nice, I mean decent. And this would have to be architecturally and aesthetically, and you know, it'd have to be in keeping with the building. So I imagine you're talking about a fairly expensive.
Kind of like the police-only sign.
Sorry. That's going away.
As I understand it, it's been painted over. It was installed according to the request. That's all I'd like to say about it.
Let's just say the request wasn't specific enough.
It matched the request.
It wasn't my request.
Back to
Yeah.
stormwater items.
Yeah, let's go back.
I noticed under the management objectives, well, first I would say I'm probably completely ignorant about stormwater, like what proper stormwater management is, and Larry could probably help us out in this department if we have questions. But first, it says, maintain list of known system problems, schedule repair of system defects as funding becomes available. That makes me a little bit scared in the sense that it sort of means that what, you know, the $48 per household number we've put out there just kind of puts a cap on what we can do, and we could have some significantly egregious situations, and we're kind of just saying we'll get to them when we get to them based on the funding. So are there things that we really should be doing or should be addressing that the level of funding we've chosen to commit does not allow us to
Well,
address?
this level of funding, we're now in our first year, second year? I'm getting a little confused. Effect for this year. So this is really the big increase, was in '08, or was it '07? So we're in our second year of increased funding. We requested the increased funding because of our perception that we were not able to keep up, and we were getting information that we weren't able to, we were worried that we wouldn't be able to act on. At this point, I'm fairly comfortable with the funding level and the amount of projects that we identify. Just to remind you how we identify projects, we have the TV inspection done of the city system, so a third of the system at a time. So every 3 years, we've gone through the entire stormwater system with a subcontractor who's doing TV inspection and cleaning. So that's our main way of identifying defects in our systems, collapsed pipes, problems, inadequate conveyance. That's kind of the main source. After the contractor comes through and does that TV inspection, that information is provided to the city engineer both in digital form as well as in identified, you know, a written report on identified problems. So he's able to print out now with our GIS system, once the inspectors come through, how many inlets had 25% or more clog. We can get a list, we can hand it to our right-of-way division, and they schedule those renovations. So we've made Herculean improvements in terms of identifying problems, not just after the fact when we have an inlet, the road's flooded and, oh, well, we got a problem, and then we investigate and find out. We still do have those, but we're making an effort to proactively identify them before, the backed up water, the problem exists. The city engineer keeps a list of identified problems, and by and large, most of them are not huge problems. I mean, they're not problems that are going to create a great amount of property damage or city system damage, but they are problems. And we just keep working our way down the list with each year. Given that we have one city engineer, and in addition to stormwater, he also does street resurfacing and all other kinds of projects, we're probably maxed out at how many projects he or the department can oversee in any given time, too. So I think we've pretty much hit a nice mix between available staff time to design and implement and oversee these projects, as well as funding levels to make sure that we're significantly dealing with them. In next year's budget, we will be addressing 3 areas that we are well aware of problems. Linden Avenue, where we have a totally defective inlet system. However, it's an inlet system that just serves the end of the street, so it hasn't created any catastrophic property loss or damage. It's just an environmental problem in that inlet leads directly into Sligo Creek Park, and it basically is gone. And it's 20-foot or more drop from the road surface down to Sligo Creek, and the pipes have collapsed and they're eroded and they're gone. We're going to be designing an innovative management system to handle that. We're not just going to put pipes back in place. We have that costed out. We know what that would cost, so we could do that. We're going to be looking at if there's alternatives, particularly because it's just such a small area that it handles. It's not a key piece in a conveyance system of numerous miles or feet of pipeline. It's fairly contained. So that's one major project. We are also going to be doing some work in the New York Avenue, Baltimore Avenue area, and I see that as a first and a very important step on a really neighborhood-wide approach to dealing with that watershed. And I'm actually really quite excited at the opportunity that's going to open up, because we've got some structural problems up there. We need to get the city's house in order in terms of both the receiving end as well as the other end. We've got some structural work to do. But in addition, because that system is backyards, basically, of people along those streets, there's a lot that we need them to do to make sure we don't get into a worse situation with erosion, pollution, and clogging of that stormwater system. We have an enormous problem with debris at the end, but it's largely because the residents don't realize it, and they rake their leaves into the big ravine every fall. And those leaves work their way down, and then that house at the end has to worry about getting flooded if the storm inlet clogs. So it's going to be a real opportunity there to get a whole neighborhood approach to a neighborhood system. I mean, it's a little environmental education project out there. What you do in your backyard really has the ability to impact others. So there's some structural work we need to do in the New York Avenue, Baltimore Avenue storm drain system. And then the third one is Sligo Mill, Poplar Mill. And again, that's another project where this is just the beginning of a very long, I think, effort towards determining what the best management strategy for that property in that environmental area is. And we're getting proposals, and we've had environmental restoration companies walk through there with us. We haven't gotten anything concrete back from them yet, so we're still sort of in a real planning stage with that, but we'd like to make some major steps towards addressing the environmental quality, water quality issues in that area. So those are really the 3 major stormwater projects that we'll be pursuing next year. There's a lot of very small, little minor projects that we'll also be working on, little sections of pipe that we know we need to repair, replace, or areas where we have ponding water and we need to change grades, or a driveway apron that's, eroding. Numerous of those projects, and the city engineer maintains his project list for that, and we just keep clipping away at them as they come in. And then lastly, with the Stormwater Fund, some of the other things that the money is used for, I mentioned the TV inspection. We also have started the outfall testing last year, so we'll be continuing that. The state of Maryland is making progress on creating the total maximum daily load, the pollution requirement that is.
NPDES?
It's all a component of the NPDES Clean Water Act project. So some of the funds will be used for outfall testing. So we'll now have a second year of outfall testing to add to the information that we have available.
And that's about quality more than quantity? Is that?
Yes, that's a water quality test. It will also start giving us opportunities in areas where we have done some innovative stormwater techniques. With our outfall testing, we now have pre-measure testing. We'll have post-measure testing, so we can begin to see whether or not some of the low-impact, non-invasive infiltration type stormwater techniques are having the desired end result in terms of improving water quality. So we're really at the beginning edge of that, but we're now there in a way that we can actually track some of that kind of thing.
Okay, thanks. I think we're through with stormwater. And the final thing this evening is to see if there are any additional requests for information or any additional reconciliation requests. I'm assuming that the city manager has added the previous ones mentioned toward the beginning of the meeting to the list, and that the list that we were provided tonight will be updated, and between now and Thursday is the time to kind of go through this and be ready for a comprehensive look at all of it on Thursday. Councilmember Wright.
The only thing that I think, and maybe it's in the budget numbers, City Manager Matthews and I haven't been able to suss it out because I'm still learning the budget, but it would be helpful to know sort of two figures around salary. One, I would just want to understand what is the percentage salary increase on average we're giving to all of the existing city staff. And then I'd also like to know how that so the total, and then I'd like to know how that compares also to the top 10% compensated staff. Just to get a sense for what we're doing around. I know we have a separate issue around benefits, which those are the two main portions.
You're looking for the general percentage that people who rate other than unsatisfactory get, and then the amount that goes toward extra on top of that?
No, I was looking for, I don't know if there's unsatisfactory don't get compensation increases, but just saying, okay, there's however many employees in the budget in 2008, and they get paid a certain amount. In 2009, in total, what are we anticipating on a percentage basis increase in salaries? That's the first. And then the second thing is, if you listed all of the staff members from lowest paid to highest paid, I'd want to also know what the percentage increase is for the top 10% of the highest paid staff, which gives you a sense of sort of that equitable aspect to the increases.
The management employees are under the same pay structure as other city employees, so whatever percentage increase any employee would get tied to a 1 rating, 2 rating, or 3 rating is the same regardless of what your classification is.
Therefore, the only figure you're looking for is the total FY08 versus total FY09, right, excluding benefits. Any other additional requests? Any other additional placements on the list at this time? We're adjourned.